afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 10th LogiSYM Malaysia, which in this year is run in conjunction with the Malaysian International Food and Beverage Group. Welcome to all our more than 500 participants. You can see you're all slowly coming into the session. So great to have such a large audience this year. We've been running LogiSYM in Malaysia for about 10 years now. And we normally have about 200 to 300 participants, but of course in a physical venue. This year is slightly different. We're doing it 100% online. And the huge benefit is that we see so many new faces joining us. Just unfortunate that it is not done in person. The challenges with COVID-19 that we're experiencing are also opportunities. Yeah. We've got the MCO in Malaysia, we've got circuit breaker in Singapore, and we've got different types of restrictions and controls in other parts of the world. But if we want to look at it from a positive perspective, the challenges that we're facing in COVID-19 are also opportunities. Opportunities for us to rethink how we actually run our supply chains, how we do logistics. And this is the time that separates the boys from the men, if you like, guys who are able to overcome, move ahead, leverage the situation and improve what they're doing, compared to the guys who fall by the wayside and don't make it through these very tough times. So by the very fact that you're actually here with us today, it means that you're in that first category, right? You're here to learn, interact, speak, communicate, learn more about what's happening in our industry. And with the focus this year, very much in the halal supply chain. So thank you to all of you for attending. Today's session is going to be short and sharp. You'll see that's going to be a we've got a global audience, and more importantly, we've also got a global group of presenters. So please take advantage of these next 3 or 4 hours. Make it an interactive session, ask questions. You can ask them in the chat function, and we'll try and address them as we progress. But take full advantage of it. All right, so welcome again, everyone, and thank you to our partners, MIFB. It's a great partnership, and we really enjoy working with you. To kick us off is an introduction to Logisim. Professor Dr. Marco Thurman has been a speaker, a presenter at Logisim for many years, and I think he's also sat in my chair before as host of Logisim. Dr. Marco, as we address him, hails from the Netherlands, and he has lived and worked in Malaysia for a number of years and is quite an expert on halal supply chains. So no one better to kick us off. And with that, over to you, Dr. Marco.
Thank you, Raymond. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and my dear friends. First of all, may peace be upon you. We are living in challenging times, but also what Raymond shared with us, there are also areas of opportunities. And I think halal logistics and supply chain management is one of those areas. And I hope to address in my keynote address some more insights on halal logistics and supply chain management. It's a great honor to be here at this platform, to be together during these COVID times. Let me just put on my slides. What I hope to share with you this afternoon is a better understanding of what are the emerging requirements. We are now in July 2021. After the emerging requirements, I will dive deeper into halal clusters, halal blockchains, and halal reputation measurement. If we talk about emerging requirements, it is important to realize that halal is not static. And some of you that heard me before have seen this slide before, but it is a very essential slide. So the evolution of halal is characterized by 4 important phases. Phase 1 is the Muslim company, where the company is not halal certified. Phase 2 is that the producer or restaurant operator is halal certified by an independent halal certification body. Phase 3 is going even further, that the entire supply chain is being addressed from source all the way to the point of consumer purchase, where risk and reputation management along the supply chain is very important. The fourth phase is the halal value chain, when we talk about an halal DNA, where beyond supply chain also you look at Islamic banking, finance, also takaful, Sharia compliant insurance, also Islamic branding, marketing, and also sustainability. Important is to notice that in November 2020, so last year, there was an international halal supply chain management system standard being introduced by the Organization of Islamic Cooperation and SMIC, who developed that standard. This standard was based on the Malaysian standard, the MS 2400, 2019, where some of you are probably already familiar with. So that OIC standard has 3 modules, transportation, warehousing, and retailing. So this, from my perspective, is a big game changer for halal logistics with the introduction of this halal supply chain standard, an international standard, which is based on the Malaysian halal supply chain standard. This is a game changer, and I think important for industries, but also logistics service providers to understand and to follow. So when we talk about the evolution of halal, it's also important for companies to realize, where am I in this evolution of halal? At which stage am I at this point in time? And also which steps are needed to bring me to the next level? What are the halal industry mega trends at this point in time? First of all, halal production is moving to halal clusters. These can be areas where other halal producers are together, or this can also be physical halal parks. More on that later. Secondly, halal supply chain management and also associated technology will be becoming very critical in the years to come. More on those technologies later. Thirdly, when we are moving towards a halal supply chain and value chain, also halal reputation measurement will be extremely important to better protect your corporate reputation, also your license to operate in serving those Muslim markets. So more insight into halal clusters. In Malaysia, we have about 21 halal parks. Next to those 21 halal parks, we also have, or within those 21 halal parks, we have 14 halal parks, which are recognized by the Halal Industry Development Corporation to be halal status, halmas parks. Those park developers meet certain requirements. So for example, they need to be at least 100 acres of size. They must have a one-stop center to facilitate also international investments into Malaysia. They should be focused on halal industry only and also protect the halal integrity within those compounds. And so we have those 14 halma status park, which also allows the industry to get certain incentives. So these are 10 years income tax exemption, or 5 years tax exemption on capital expenditure, as well as no import duty on any equipment that you're bringing into those parks. So extensive investment incentives have been developed by the Malaysian government if you are located in one of those halal parks. Those halal parks developed in Malaysia already more than 10 years ago. And in my research work with my colleague, Dr. Ridwan Darun, we describe the first development of those halal parks as Halal Park 1.0, which were dedicated halal zones focusing on halal industry or halal certifiable industry. There was often support in halal certification, and there were also government incentives associated for companies that are investing in those dedicated halal zones, those halal parks. However, I felt that those halal parks needed to be developed to the next stage. I mean, the first parks were there about 10 years ago. So I developed the Halal Park 2.0 concept together with my colleague, Dr. Rizwan, that goes beyond those four components. That is also looking at creating a halal cluster organization to grow, to further create innovation in the halal cluster, to manage and expand the halal cluster further. Secondly, also to be focused very much on halal logistics through halal storage facilities, through also halal transportation, and also 3PL and halal 4PL solutions. Sustainability is another important pillar. And today we talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, so 17 in total, which is now also turned into regulation in many countries, which will be very important for the years to come. And finally, also Islamic finance and Wakaf is also important pillar of Halal Park 2.0. So Islamic finance is clear about the financing according to Sharia requirements. Wakaf, on the other hand, is technically Islamic philanthropy, where we talk about poverty elevation, which is very important now during those COVID, but also looking at how do we protect SMEs, do we create special facilities for SMEs, education of SMEs, and also general research on halal can also be part under Islamic philanthropy. So we have to move those halal parks towards a more advanced model, I think, which will be more relevant in the years to come. I'm an academic to develop new concepts, but I'm also a consultant. So I've been very pleased to implement this Halal Park 2.0 concept already in Indonesia. So in Indonesia, I've been the project director of an interesting development, 500 hectares Halal Park on Java Island, 1 hour drive from Jakarta in Banten, Cikande, where we create a 500 hectares halal industrial cluster. In this cluster, we have SMEs, we have food manufacturing. Also, we have a quite extensive logistics zone for logistics service providers. Also a commercial zone with also halal labs and Islamic banks. And we have a direct connection through the dry port. We will have soon a direct connection via the rail infrastructure of Indonesia all the way to Tanjung Priok, which is the main port of Indonesia. So this is an advanced concept based on Halal Park 2.0, where we created a Halal Valley Society to manage the halal cluster, also created SME programs for industry and farmers, have collaboration with the national government and local government in Banten, Cikande, and also focus very much on research and education, not only academic research, but also research together with industry players that are based there. So we're creating a halal ecosystem there, creating access to raw materials, supply and supporting industry for our programs for farmers and SMEs. And of course, Indonesia has a good labor force, but also is today the largest halal market of the world. Indonesia has been over the past 5 years also really expanding their infrastructure, road, sea, air, and also rail infrastructure, which makes Indonesia also more attractive today from a logistics point of view. At Modern Halal Valley, we also created an international cluster network where we have been signing agreements to connect to all the clusters in Europe, also other parts of Asia like Taiwan, and also in Malaysia with Penang Halal Park and also Iskandar Halal Park in Johor. So that Halal Cluster Network wants to work together with other clusters to pool better resources, to collaborate in halal supply chain, to work according to the international standards of halal supply chain, and also be consistent in the communication So we use the code Halal supply chain of freight documents, labels, and electronic communication. We also want to have a green lane between countries, that we have a very efficient importation and exports of halal goods between countries. We also promote halal trade between those clusters and also help in the sourcing of all products that are required, as well as facilitating in the export of product and sharing knowledge. So if you talk about the halal cluster, it is good, I think, to understand that halal supply chains are very complex. So what the advantages of those halal clusters and halal parks is that it can simplify halal for companies that are producing halal by putting halal experts and halal industries physically together, and so you can better work together and better organize halal supply chains from source all the way to the point of consumer purchase. The second area I would like to share with you is on halal blockchain, which is another trend, I think, which will be relevant for the years to come. And also some speakers after me will be addressing that in more detail. In November 2020, December 2020, we had a halal meat cartel scandal, which was shared through the New Straits Times, that there was a cartel importing various kinds of meats into Malaysia and stamping them as halal, labeling them as halal, and distributing them through Malaysia. And at the end, it was not sure if it was really halal. And it was a big issue here in Malaysia, and has been a big issue, and also came to the attention of the government, and the government has been doing a lot to find out who those culprits were. It also started realizing in Malaysia that how sensitive halal is, but also how complex halal supply chains are. Because if you talk about the halal integrity of an end product you're buying, it is a function of all those parties in a supply chain. So your halal supply chain is not as strong as its strongest link, but it is as strong as its weak. Question was, what was the weak link here in Malaysia? So was it about that halal is not communicated on freight documents, like also customs in Malaysia doesn't recognize the halal status. It's also not recognized in other countries like Singapore and Indonesia. So there is a problem that halal is not recognized on freight documents. How are we addressing halal also in seaports and airports and through land borders? So Malaysia also has land borders with Indonesia and Sabah and Sarawak, also land borders with Thailand and Singapore here in West Malaysia. So how are we managing halal for that crosses our borders? Today, although there were some halal port initiatives in Penang Port and also North Port, there are currently no seaports or airports really halal certified. So Malaysia Airlines Cargo, that is those parties halal certified as an operator. But there have been very few certification attempts on the airports and seaport sites so far. Also, the location of that repackaging of halal meat is apparently very sensitive. So is that wise to allow that to be done everywhere, or can those be better parked in halal parks? Maybe with a better halal ecosystem. So this incident, that halal meat cartel scandal, gave a lot of questions on how good is our halal ecosystem today, and what can be improved as well to make it even better. So what should we do? From my perspective, I think it's important to educate, I think, industries better on halal supply chain management. We have to use also the halal supply chain standards. So in Malaysia, we have the MS 2400 halal supply chain management system standard, which is same as the international standard. So we need to use that standards also, I think, for industries, but also for our gateway partners, seaports and airports. Retail also has a module in the MS 2400, and until today there are no halal certified retailers in Malaysia. So there, I think there's still work to do. We also have to look at upgrading, I think, those halal parks we have in Malaysia to Halal Park 2.0 concept to provide a more comprehensive halal cluster and halal ecosystem. So there are issues in today's halal supply chain based on trust, integrity, and transparency, but also the challenges in optimizing halal supply chains. So there is an opportunity to also use technologies and blockchain technology to make this happen. So from my perspective, blockchain technology has potential in better managing the halal supply chains to better protect the halal integrity for the Muslim consumer and also the brand owner. So under University Malaysia Pahang, I started a project back in 2017 to test this blockchain technology. Can this be used for managing halal supply chains? So currently we are testing this with a pharmaceutical company in Malaysia, if this blockchain technology is useful. How we organized our blockchain solution as a supply chain execution system, as a tool based on the requirements of the destination market to instruct everybody in the supply chain to meet the requirements of the destination market. So if this cargo goes to Saudi Arabia, everybody in supply chain is notified how to handle and what to communicate on the freight documents this product along the supply chain all the way to the Saudi country. When we send a product to Indonesia, we have to make sure that all our handlings and communication is according to the requirements of Indonesia. So we use instructions in the supply chain to meet the requirements of the destination country. We also realized that with the incident that happened also before 2020 in supply chains, is that we need to create a tool in case there's an incident also to help the brand owner to manage the incident in terms of to recall product, a public recall or a silent trade recall, and also communicate the necessary information to the halal certification body. So in our design, we created smart contracts for supply chain execution in terms of handling and communication. Also on halal issue management to communicate with the halal authority based on different categories of incidents, and also manage product recalls. So we have published quite a lot on this research. So if you go to Google Scholar, you can find more information on our research. I think some future applications on halal blockchains are diverse. I think we can use that in combination with security labels. Also, I think applications can be there in halal parks, in halal clusters, in halal logistics operations, in container operations for shipping, air cargo operation also for those ULDs and those air cargo pallets, and also in trading and e-commerce. Because there are a lot of halal e-commerce players, but if you talk about the logistics, then it still uses the conventional logistics. So it is a halal platform, but the backbone of the halal trade and halal e-commerce is not based on halal logistics. So I think also blockchains could be used for that. Blockchains, I have only two concerns, is don't create unnecessary hardship for industries. We have to stimulate SME development and not kill it. Secondly, I think we have to be very conservative about the introduction of Islamic cryptocurrencies. Does it have intrinsic value? Is it not based on interest, speculation, or ambiguity, which are no-goes from an Islamic banking financing point of view? So I think I'm convinced that blockchain technology will be important, I think, for the future, and certainly to bring companies to the next level from a halal product approach to a halal supply chain and also a halal value chain. Finally, some last comments on halal reputation measurement. So this diagram, which I'm sharing with you, shows that the brand owner impact the brand owner has on both halal reputation and halal integrity. What happens when you want to be halal certified as a brand owner, you need to define a halal assurance system, which clarifies where are your halal control points and also halal supply chain and so halal control points and also control measures in your supply chain, in purchasing, in production, and in distribution. So this determines also how you organize your end-to-end supply chain, from source all the way to the point of consumer purchase. So that determines also the halal integrity of your supply chain. On the other hand, all the actions you do as a brand owner also will reflect into your halal DNA. So it is important, next to the measurement of your halal supply chain performance, also to measure your halal reputation performance. So this will be very important in the years to come. So I developed in my research 3 measurements on how to best measure your halal reputation. So this is first of all a halal trust rating, which is based on a consumer survey addressing the different aspects on halal trust from the Muslim consumer related to the halal logo, the level of excellence from at the point of view from the consumer. Are the company addressing halal excellence? How transparent is the brand owner, halal authenticity of the brand, and also what is the halal intention of the brand. The second measurement I think is important is the halal reputation index, where you measure the halal authenticity of the company, trustworthiness of the halal certification body being used by the brand owner, also how the brand owner is organizing its halal reputation, looking at the strategy, issue management, and crisis management. And finally, also what is the external messaging by external stakeholders. So what can we find on the internet of this brand owner related to halal? Is it all positive? Is it negative? And what is the actual track record of the company on this? You can also relate the halal reputation index also to specific market requirements. So what is the relationship to the Indonesian market as a brand, to the Saudi market or to the Malaysian market? So then you get your weighted corporate halal reputation relating to your halal market requirements. So due to new regulations, just due to Muslim community developments, your license to operate could change in certain Muslim markets. So I think to come in conclusion that it's important to measure next to your halal supply chain integrity also your corporate halal reputation. So some final notes. I know I'm close to time. So halal is complex, I think, needs to be addressed by design. I think we need to put in effort to protect the halal integrity and corporate reputation of brand owners. And I think the logistics service provider has an important role in here. So it is about addressing halal in various aspects in your supply chain and go beyond that into your entire DNA and make sure you measure your corporate performance. So this was my presentation, and I look forward also to the other speakers on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thanks for kicking us off. Excellent presentation as always. I like that statement that you made about halal blockchain or just blockchain in general. Don't create unnecessary work for SMEs, right? Because sometimes we may not need to introduce that technology into our supply chains just because it's a buzzword out there. But yeah, thank you very much. We'll be right back for our next session after the short intermission. 30 seconds and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Great opening remarks with our keynote from Professor Dr. Marco Thurman. Moving right along, we've got our next expert panel. So we've got 4 very learned individuals who are going to be sharing their views with us on halal supply chain technology, and especially interesting around halal blockchain, traceability, and security. It's going to be a panel session. It's going to be led by Stephanie Krishnan, who's also another regular at Logisim. Stephanie hails from Australia originally and is currently Research Director Asia Pacific for IDC. Stephanie, over to you.
Thank you, Ramon, and thank you to everyone. As Ramon said, we're here to talk about the halal supply chain technology, halal blockchain traceability and security. Today with me, I have our participants, Mr. Thomas Guerrero, Manager of the Halal Trade and Marketing Center, Chris Long, Regional Sales Manager at Honeywell Logistics Solutions, Dr. Rushdie Siddiqui, Co-founder and CEO at iPortal Live, and Dr. Albert Tan, Associate Professor at Malaysia Institute of Supply Chain Innovation. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, I'd just like to start off. We have a number of questions for our discussion, but you know, what I would like to do is just do an opening perspective. I mean, we've heard a lot about the impact of different technology. Oh, sorry, we will hear a lot about the impact of different technologies on the halal supply chain. In terms of where the industry is now, maybe you could just each of you give an opening perspective. And if I could start with you, Dr. Albert. Sorry, Dr. Albert, you're on mute.
Hi everyone. I've been doing some work in Malaysia and also in Pakistan on the halal supply chain, understanding the challenges involved in the traditional method of compliance to the halal requirement. And I still find that there are a lot of opportunities to use blockchain to kind of enable the information to flow between the farm to the fork. The only challenge is a big question today is really who is going to invest in the IoT to collect the data, and who is the one who is going to pay for the blockchain solution to access whether the food is halal. So some of these are still not no solution at the point. But otherwise, I think it will be a good start to look at some of the countries that are really dominantly the Muslim community.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Albert. And Chris, I mean, we've talked about the investment issues.
Yep.
In terms of an opening comment from you, how do you think the region is the region ready for F&B halal traceability?
Yeah, I think for me, I think I agree with Dr. Albert. I think from traceability especially for halal, I think traceability, track and trace is the key part. So I put it in two perspectives, two angles. One is actually the upstream, basically from raw food, from the farm until you go to the processing plant. So how you want to trace the origins, the source of the raw materials. So after you finish the goods, then you transport to the warehouse to do a distribution and all this, and how you want to make sure that when you are storing, are you following the halal's rule and regulation? For example, it shouldn't be mixed with the non-halal food. That's one thing, and how you want to handle it when using technology. For example, there's a lot of technologies available in the market. I think that's one thing. I think come back to the second question, other than investment, the challenges, I think the top important is actually the knowledge and also the competency. I was talking competency means that the people that we know the technologies and how to apply in the business know-how. And actually, this is a gap that is missing. Even we come across, talk to some of customers, they are willing to invest, but they do not have the knowledge how blockchains can help them. And when they know, then who can help them to do that? Then the competency is a gap. So I think that is a part that have to fix the gap before the investors or the businessmen, they are willing to invest in this kind of person, because invest in a solution is not easy, because not only money, you need to put in the asset, you put in the people, and it's talking about 2 to 3 years investment. Then for us, myself is from a software background. So when you want to build from one software from zero to something, for first 3 years, it's almost like investment. You don't expect any return, any ROI from that, because it's purely R&D, research, and also innovation, development, and all this. So that is where a lot of people or investors, they are very reluctant to take this part. So that's my comment. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll definitely unpack that a little later down the track as we talk about the tolerance for that. Now, Dr. Rushdie, if I could segue to you, and we could talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you see affecting customer and consumer perceptions with regards to this.
Well, the existing narrative of halal is about halal certification bodies and halal certificates. But halal doesn't operate in a vacuum of those two things. It operates in a macro world, and the macro world today encompasses climate change, and the antidote to climate change, which is sustainability. So for a segment of this particular space, there's a concern of what is the carbon footprint of the halal industry, because the Muslim world as a whole is a net importer of food. Food is coming from Brazil and Australia and New Zealand and the US and Netherlands into the Gulf countries, into Malaysia. So you've got upstream carbon footprint, and then you've got the food mileage issue. And this is a concern. Why this is a concern? Because it goes into the faith. The faith talks about stewardship responsibilities to the people, the planet, and the pursuit of prosperity, which is aligned to what the SDGs are about. So when you're talking about halal, it isn't just a certification or certification body. It is a bigger issue, and that bigger issue is responsible consumption. And I think that the young generation, Gen M, which is this bulge bracket demographics, is going to increasingly vote for halal to move towards being more carbon conscious.
Great, thank you for that. And Tomas, if we're going to round out with you and your comments on perhaps starting with the opening challenges and constraints that you see around it. You're on mute, sorry.
Sure, thank you so much, Stephanie. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, well, controlling the production of halal consumer goods has been the main concern of halal authorities in the 57 YC countries. But now some of these halal authorities have become also concerned about the storage and transportation of these halal products. No, well, the lack of mandatory halal standards requiring halal certified companies to use halal logistics and transport services to marketing and distribute their halal products is sometimes causing or generating cross-contamination issues, which shatter the good work done by companies many times, undermining also consumer trust in these products, and obviously also calls into question the work of the halal traceability system based on from farm to fork.
Right, thank you. And I think that trust is also, when you're looking at trying to, transverse supply chains across the whole world, then you have, mismatches between standards and acceptable ways of handling or controlling the halal supply chain can also be an issue there. Yeah. So and coming to that, the requirements for halal logistics are often associated with things like transportation and cargo and warehouses, but in reality, it does continue through suppliers, through manufacturers, distributors, and retailers, right? So in terms of points of failure, Tomas, that you think require attention, perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on that for us.
Sure. Well, the integrative vision of Islam reaches all aspects related to consumer goods, including the logistics chain, handling, storage, transport, and the distribution processes. This fact is so important considering that many of the 57 Muslim majority countries, especially in the North Africa and Middle East regions, are importing a large percentage of the goods that they are consuming. They are highly dependent on external sources and have deficit trade balances. For example, in the case of food and beverage products, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, are importing on average around 70% of this type of goods, which is the case in terms of other products such as cosmetic or pharma. No? As a result of recent cases of halal products cross-contamination or some cases of food fraud, the full traceability of halal products, including the logistic aspect, has become more important. In the same way that the certification of halal products incorporates aspects related to hygiene or food safety, there are a series of critical points along the logistic chain that are being considered for their subsequent incorporation into the halal standard and requirement established by some Muslim majority countries. Regarding the production points, the labeling and packaging of halal products stand out. In terms of storage, critical points include segregated storage, cold storage, and maintenance of traceability. In the case of transport, for example, at the international level, critical points are observed in transport services when it comes to guaranteeing the integrity of the products, for which it is necessary to have means to prevent possible cross-contamination. The same applies to transportation at the national level, as well as to wholesale and retail distribution. So basically, the incipient regulation of Muslim market with regard to halal logistics represent an opportunity for differentiation as well as for competitiveness for logistic operators. In the long term, it will be a requirement to have halal certified logistic services for companies that work with the Muslim majority markets, which obviously represent a competitive advantage for those operators that are capable of guaranteeing the halal integrity of their logistics chains.
Yes, thank you very much. I totally agree with that. There will definitely be a first mover advantage. So, you know, if we can pivot there and look at, you know, we've looked at some of the points of failure and some of the opportunities, I guess, where we can actually look at improving the halal supply chain. How, you know, we're going to turn now to how technologies can support and monitor the integrity of the halal logistics process. And if I could start with you, Dr. Albert, you've mentioned briefly about blockchain and the use of sensors. Where do you see technology being applied in this?
Because blockchain is able to, you know, gather information from many different part of the supply chain. And it also validates some of the data, whether it is compliance to certain regulations by using smart contract. So I see there's a lot of opportunity here for us to look into how to collect data from the farm, validate whether they have certified by some lab, and then when they move on to the slaughterhouse, whether they can have another device, an IoT device that will certify that they have been slaughtered in a proper way. And then they move on to the warehouse. Again, make sure the warehouse is a halal warehouse. And then before they are moved to the retail. So at each point of the critical point, we can collect data and accumulate it onto the blockchain. I think it will make a lot of sense. The only challenge that my research team found out is that you cannot use one blockchain for the entire supply chain. Let me give you an example. Because if you look at Bitcoin, the Bitcoin from the beginning to the end doesn't change its form or its entity. But when you look at a cow, when it's slaughtered, it becomes different types of meat. And then you go through processing, it becomes another type of end products. So you find that it's very hard to have one single blockchain that will trace all the way up to the retail. And we also discover that when you look at most of the blockchain solution for halal system, they always start from retail. I don't know, you know, halal dinner, what's halal and all that, they start from retail. So that when anyone scan the products or QR code, they will know whether it's halal. But they don't start from the beginning, the farm, because first of all, who is going to pay for all the big investment to collect data from the farm? But I think if we were to look at coming up with a good business model where it could be a PPP model, where the government, the halal regulators, and then the consumer and the producer form together a consortium to build this blockchain portal. I think there will be a lot of synergy and can think about how to move that forward. That's what I'm trying to help in Pakistan now. So they have a regulator, they have government funding, and then they have the consumer plus the producer of the food. So they want to combine, and the objective is to export the food overseas, not so much for internal consumption. Very interesting, because they find that the main market is export to other Middle East countries and things like that.
All right. So your contention is that you believe a public-private partnership would accelerate the adoption of this, and through that, countries can actually achieve a comparative advantage in this particular industry, which will bring potential for wealth, etc. Interesting. Now, Chris, we had a bit of a conversation before, and you had some consensus around that with the focus of upstream and the need to track raw materials. Did you want to expand on your thoughts for this?
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I think I've seen quite a number of blockchain application available in the market, and some case study. I think personally I come across some, I think in Vietnam, they use the blockchain to trace the mango from the farm down to the supermarkets and all this, and this is where you can easily trace with that. But I think I agree with Albert. I think the major problem that how we're going to put all this data in a single platform where the data can be shared among different providers. I call it providers, means that maybe someone will provide a blockchain solution from the upstream, someone will provide a solution from a downstream. But how the data to be shared in the different platform, and what is the rule and regulation to regulate all this information, and who going to provide the platform to collect all this data. And second thing is actually IoT. The IoT, who going to provide the total solution to collect the information in a central location, and this data will be shared to the different providers, enablers. I think it's not an issue to build, not a problem to build a solution for that. But I think at the end of the day, come back to the data. I think to cover what Albert mentioned, I totally agree that you need to have a platform to store the end-to-end data so that it can be shared to different providers. That is where only you can achieve from end-to-end traceability from upstream down to downstream. That is one of my comments. Yep.
Great, and I do agree with that to an extent. I mean, we are seeing some investment at IDC. We're actually seeing a 25% increase in blockchain of investment by manufacturers. But having, we're expecting to see that over the next 2 years. However, having that investment actually push upstream into the raw materials, I think, is going to be a challenge. And like we talked about earlier, who pays? We've mentioned briefly the public-private partnership, but I'd contend that ultimately, if you were going to start an organization today that was looking at providing food or goods that are going to be halal friendly, you would definitely do it a different way than had you started that business 10 or even 5 years ago. I think we're going to see a lot of challenges. And Chris, you and I mentioned about some of the different types of knowledge that come in when we do this.
Yep. I think is from a technology point of view. I think if you want to do that, I still focus on two things. Technology itself. We have in today's market, there's a lot of technologies guys out there, programmers and all this. And I think we need to combine the technicals and the business know-how for halal industry, because I think if you want to get someone that know the halal industry, who totally know that, and this must pass all these best practices, the business best practices, to the technologies guy, where they can create a solution for that. And I can see that actually, I share with you, I've seen a lot of customers, they have a good team of technical guys, but they just need the input or the business know-how for the particular industry. For example, 3PL. Some of them, they create a good platform for 3PL, but they just don't have the content. So I think the key thing is that I have to put the talents together from technicals and also the subject expert for the halal, so that only you can create the solution to solve the current problem in this halal logistics. Yep.
Yeah, and I think, again, if you're going to start a company today, then you would definitely bring those challenges together, right? You would look at having those sort of capabilities.
Yes, correct. I think the major challenge for for technology point of view, it's actually that a lot of companies, they want to do everything by themselves. For me, if I want to start a company to have a solution for this particular, you must put in different parties together. Then only you can create a solution for the particular problems. That's what I see. Yep.
Yeah, leveraging partnerships, I think, is key, and whether it become from, and Dr. Albert's mentioned the importance of the public-private partnership, and I think that bringing academia in, bringing the appropriate vendors in, and of course bringing the those that are able to advise on halal practices and make sure that we're conforming to the requirements that are inherent in the religious teachings. Yes, and of course we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Another point is that like in Malaysia, we have the JICIM. So the JICIM is very useful in the committee because they can set the rules in the smart contract, because that is very important. Once they set the rule, then the compliance can keep evolve over time. If we are going to use it from a layman or from a technical developer, you will not see this happening.
Yep, correct.
Agreed. Yes, for sure. All right. Now, in terms of the potential of blockchain, now, Albert, you've talked about this a little bit. Why blockchain? I mean, theoretically, we could use any database, any capability, any storage mechanism. Why is blockchain seen as the one that has the highest potential here?
I guess the main feature of blockchain is one of them is immutability. Basically, once the data is stored, you cannot change. But that also create another set of issues, which we can talk about that later. Another set is that it is decentralized. So the moment somebody update the data, everybody can read them, and then they can know the latest real-time status of the information. This is again very powerful in blockchain, decentralized ledger technology, distributed ledger technology. And the third one is security. You cannot duplicate the information, or you cannot even manipulate the data. So again, these are few things that you will not be able to duplicate with an ERP solution or any turnkey solution easily. Yeah. So I think and also, I think the last part, which is the smart contract, which is the most beautiful part in blockchain, is that once we can update all our halal requirement into the smart contract, it automatically validates the blockchain system from the data that they collect. So this is something, again, you cannot find a turnkey solution that can solve all these at one go. Yeah. So I think all these features are built towards supporting this kind of environment, I guess. So,
great, thank you. Now, you've mentioned a number of different features, and I guess for a lot of companies, blockchain might seem to be quite technical. Now, I've just had a question come out, and I'm putting it out for anybody to answer. What efforts are in place to bring like small suppliers, or how can small suppliers come up to speed with processes or technologies? Because this is often the sort of digital transformation is associated with large organizations and the sort of capabilities they might be able to build. Is blockchain accessible to small suppliers, and how can they get across it?
Stephanie, if I could chime in on that, if you don't
Sure.
mind. So several years ago, I ran a halal e-commerce platform out of Malaysia when I was living there. And the challenge with this particular space was the authenticity and vetting of that supplier and their products. The SMEs, especially the S and the micro S in this space, they basically are in the analog world. You're trying to basically now bring them into the digital world. If you bring them into the digital world, you have to bring their supplier and their customer. That's why the halal e-commerce platforms have not taken off as expected, because everything is offline, and migrating the seller online means you got to migrate the supplier and the customer, and that's a huge infrastructure and mindset change. And it has to be done, but it's going to take time. That's the first thing. The other thing that I thought that is extremely important for me to chime in on based upon my experience in this space was if you basically do the use case and have applied for blockchain, it's going to add to the price of the end product, right? Because you're injecting another element into the formula. The halal space at the masses is a price sensitive market. And if you look at that particular optic and you're saying you're going to increase the price of this particular product in a price sensitive market, you're going to basically take some people, especially in this COVID environment where people's savings have been diminished and the governments are not as forthcoming with the funding, you're going to take them out of the marketplace because it may be blockchain compliant and it's halal compliant, but it's priced out of the masses, say in Malaysia. So this is an extremely important point where reality and practicality has to jibe with technology.
Yeah, Dr. Albert, you're working on a project in Pakistan. Does that gel with what you're seeing there?
Yeah, I totally agree with him about the suppliers are the one who is really very price sensitive on additional costs to pay for the blockchain. So we should be looking at, when we have this blockchain, what is the value proposition for the consumer? Are they willing to pay for that assessment of the whether the small retailer, are they willing to pay for that small amount of money to get information? So one of the business model is that we can give, in Pakistan, they will give the first 100 scan free to any consumer. But beyond 100 scan of their product, whether they are halal or not, they have to pay a certain amount. And there are about 800 million Muslim consumer in Pakistan. So imagine the amount of people who are going to pay $1 US a month. I think that will be worth thinking about from a mass adoption. Yeah. So for the smaller SME, right, again, is how can we have someone to kind of fund the IoT for these small players? Or how can the point of sales in the small SME retail be able to upload into the blockchain? So those are a few things that, again, you see, blockchain is only collecting data, is storing data, it's not collecting data. The biggest cost today is the collection of data from all the different IoT, point of sales, ERP, and that one is all the API that we need to pay. Somebody have to pay for the API to connect all this to the blockchain. Yeah, but I think as I mentioned, I think a few years ago in Malaysia there was a chocolate factory. I don't know if you all heard or not. Someone accused them that their chocolates are not halal, and then for 1 or 2 months, their sales went down quite a lot. And then after they were proven that they are innocent, they only came back to, I met the senior over there. After that, they say they only can get back 60% of their market share that they used to have. So I think the lesson learned is that sometimes the bigger companies like these chocolate factories and all that, they are more than willing to be able to build, as what Chris said, build their own blockchain first. Now is, can we have another blockchain superimposed on all these blockchain to consolidate them, so that that the consumer don't have to say, for chocolate I go to this blockchain, for fish and meat I go to another blockchain. So you have another blockchain that superimposed on all these, like what we call a control tower. Superimposed on all this. I think that would be a nice feature to think about.
I think this comes back to Tomas's point earlier about the need for standardization or some sort of at least cross understanding, perhaps. Yeah. Now, I just want to segue a little bit into the idea of, we talked about some of the major hurdles to adoption. Chris, you've mentioned knowledge and best practices. If a company is going to go down this route, what sort of knowledge, is it knowledge about the standards that Tomas has mentioned? Is it knowledge about the sustainability side? Is it the technical knowledge that you think they're lacking? Where does this knowledge need to be built up?
I think they're put in two parts. One is actually, I don't see you have any problem on the technical part where you're going to find the right person to build a solution. I think there's a bunch of how to say expert is down there. I think the most important that we need to know what is the end-to-end processes and what is the key thing in the Halal's logistic. Because I think just now Albert mentioned like this one cannot have a mistake, because once you miss one mistake, actually the reputations of the product itself is gone. I mean, I'm from Malaysia, I know, because it's very sensitive issue. If your product claimed to be halal, but you've been found it's not halal, it's a big offense. I mean, that is a big issue. So I think that is where we need someone that really expert to provide all this information from end to end, how to put in the best practices and also the business know-how for this halal logistic into the solution itself. That is I think that is where I will say that is that we need to get someone to work together with that. I don't see technical as an issue, because I think in today's world, you can easily get a group of people who can build whatever technology you have. As I share with you, I have a client that in Indonesia, they are a group of IT people, young IT people. It's about 20, 25, 36. They back from US and they form a company doing logistics, and none of them know about logistics, about 3PL. But the good thing is they found a subject expert who can tell them how they should build the process flows and also the best practice into their platform. And 4 years time, they are now booming in Indonesia. That is a real, I think that's why I say technicals and the business know-how have to combine together. Only you can have the right solution for the particular industry. Maybe it's not only for halal, but for other industries. Because for me, I think halal, there's a big market, not only from the raw materials, food, for example, pharmaceuticals, the medicines, your cosmetic. That is all the big market in the whole. For me, I look at that, it's a big market share for that. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Now, Dr. Rushdie, you've mentioned climate issues and the carbon footprint and food mileage. Do you see any opportunities for technology to support halal logistics and enables the environmental sustainability in the halal food supply chain and address the food mileage that food is going through?
All we can do is try and put forth hypothesis at the end of the day. So food is produced in the Brazils and the Netherlands and so on and so forth, and it's put on cargo ships, and they are using bunker fuel, which is polluting fuel often, and that is contributing to the carbon emissions. So the halal food is directly contributing to carbon emissions. So yes, you can get cleaner fuels, but it may cost more, which means the price of the product goes up. But in this particular space, you can also have carbon offsets, which is common, and it is being utilized every day. So it's important to inject this type of conversation into the halal space, because the narrative has to explain. At the production level, if we can localize production by looking at vertical farms, hydroponic farming, 3D printing, if we look at cellular-based meats, plant-based meats, the challenge is scale, which is a function of funding. So if we take a pilot, say in Malaysia, a halal hub globally, and they basically said that, let's try this and let's see how much of the carbon emissions associated with the halal food is reduced. And in localizing, you're also having a multiplier effect of jobs locally, right? So the way to look at halal isn't just standards, because the standards aren't there. So what are you going to put into blockchain and smart contracts, right? Ask the man on the street about blockchain and halal. They're going to give you, what are you talking about? Look, you talk to them about JAKIM, which is the standardization body. In Malaysia, they feel more comfortable. The Cadbury example that Dr. Tan mentioned was rescued because of JAKIM. Even if blockchain was around there, people still feel comfortable with what they know, which has been around, versus technology. Because in their mind, the mindset is, if it's not broke, what are you fixing?
Sorry, ultimately, yes. And I think that's a hurdle that we're going to have to get over, even as a as a race, well, as a species, right? Not just a race. I think it's going to be something that we all need to address. And I think some of the technologies that you brought in, especially around reducing that food mileage, is going to be critical there. Yeah. Now, at IDC, sorry, was there another?
No, Stephanie, I would like to add something, because we were speaking about the standards regulating halal logistics. So I think we have another issue, no? As you can see, sometimes the halal logistic standards requirements are quite strict, and in many cases developed by bodies that don't understand sometimes the flow of logistic activities. The current regulation, from my point of view, is not how to say, cost effective in many cases, since it makes companies incur in some important costs in allocating specialized halal infrastructure like warehouses, containers, for complying with the existing requirements of the coming from the halal logistic standards. So how to say, first of all, we have only two standards for halal logistics, the Malaysian ones, and now we also have the SMIC ones. But those standards, they are not mandatory for the halal certified companies, for companies working with halal products. So that's the first problem. We don't have mandatory standards. So we have the recommendations, the guidelines, but the companies, obviously they are not following those requirements. And sometimes when you go deep into the standard, the requirement, you can see that some of the requirements are, as I said, not cost effective for companies. So I think, how to say, in the future we need to think more about the standard, the enforcement, the requirements, and if we can come with something more flexible for companies trying to do business with halal and trying to come with this traceability system, no, from farm to fork.
Yeah, I think incorporating some of the comments earlier, especially like Dr. Rushdie was mentioning cost and how markets can be price sensitive. I think if we're more holistic in our approach in how we address that, that might be a consideration there. We've had one question, which I'll put up there, and then we'll have to look at wrapping up as we are 5 minutes away from end. Dr. Rushdie, what will move the needle to localize food production, do you think?
The key issue is people feeling comfortable that they can source stuff that's trusted. See, the key issue is there's a supply chain that the food was grown on this farm, which was in a different state, in a different country. And so when they see that made in XY place, they have this level of comfort and they can purchase. Now you're saying it's going to be made in a hydroponic farming. They've never heard of the word hydroponic farming. So there has to be this narrative expansion. This awareness and education is extremely, extremely important for the localization to be accepted. The government can basically say, yes, we will front load a lot of startups in the agri-tech space to localize food production, to displace the imports. But at the same time, do the people feel comfortable consuming stuff that's grown in a laboratory and not in the soil? That's extremely important.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of education that needs to be done around that, and that will certainly, as the question implied, move the needle. All right, now we have 4 minutes left. I just like to go through each of you with a wrap-up statement in terms of where you see the market heading, and if you could highlight just one bright spot or one point that you think companies should focus on in order to further this. What would you say it would be? Perhaps we could start with Chris this time.
Okay, I think for me, I think from technology, for technologies for providers, I think for when we plan for the solution, is actually we look at holistic view. But when it comes to execution, I think we have to chop it part by part, because when a lot of companies, they stop when they say, wow, this is a big project, investment so much, blah, 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 that will stop them. So I think for company perspective, for anyone that want to adopt the technologies in this industry, I think start from small. You have to think in big, but execution plan phase by phase. For example, the first phase, you start from traceability from the warehouse to the customers. Then after that, when the technologies and the solutions matured, then you expand it to the upstream levels and all this. Because the moment that you have everything, you want to do everything in one time, that is almost like impossible. So
yeah,
I
it
think
becomes
that,
prohibitive.
yes.
Yeah, so break it into small chunks is your advice.
Yes.
And I'm going to have to keep it short there. Yeah,
Big in the big, cut it in the small.
cut
Right.
this small. Great.
Yeah.
All right, now Dr. Tan, Dr. Albert, perhaps if you could just briefly again, so we've got 2 minutes left. You're on mute. Sorry.
I think the most important is really coming up with a value proposition. Why should they be using your blockchain so that they are willing to pay? Otherwise, you can have the most beautiful blockchain, but nobody going to use and nobody going to pay. So my is really think harder. What is your value proposition before you start doing the blockchain?
Good advice. Thomas?
Sure. In my case, as I already said, I think it's important to think more about the standards and the enforcement, because here it's good to talk about the disruptive technology for helping the halal industry, the halal logistic players to come with a good traceability system. But the thing is, we don't have, first of all, a global halal standard. Now we have SMIC ones, but sometimes when you go, as I told you, to the requirements and see how they are asking companies to work with halal for the logistic area, sometimes, as I said, it's not cost effective, and is making companies to invest money if they want to come with halal logistic services or use halal logistic transport or logistic services. So I think it's important to rethink about the standards and the requirements for using halal logistic.
Great. So make the standards simple enough so that they're easy to adhere to, cost effective, and that way people can do it and you can enforce it.
Yes.
Yeah, I agreed. Dr. Rushdie.
Technology is not the magic bullet.
Yeah,
That I can tell you for sure. Malaysia is a halal hub and an Islamic finance hub. And there have been no successful halal blockchain pilots. So Malaysia can basically look at one of its farms, whether it's for animal growth, for animal raising, or for production, put that on blockchain, and then put it onto the supply chain, lorries to the different states, and then retail. And then showcase that by IDC or whoever, because that would be the first use case pilot in the blockchain, and that is the way to go. Otherwise, all this is academic, honestly.
agreed. If anybody has that sort of pilot happening, please let me know. I'd be happy to write about it. So yeah, shameless plug for IDC there. Thank you, Dr. Rushdie. All right, now I'd like to pass it back to Ramon. Thank you to my speakers first. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us at the very early hours of the morning, Dr. Rushdie. It's very much appreciated, but I appreciate the time of all of you. And thank you to the audience for your attention today. Passing it back to Ramon. Thank you.
Thanks, Steph. I made some opening remarks today about the opportunities around COVID-19. And whilst we were in the waiting room, a few of us were chatting. And just imagine today, the symposium that we're attending now, we've got Dr. Rushdie calling in from New York at 3 a.m. We've got Thomas from Portugal, but based in Dubai. We've got Dr. Albert Tan, associated with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but based in Singapore. And in my next panel, I've got three gentlemen, Michael, who is currently in Germany, who lives in Singapore, and who will be going through 2 weeks of quarantine next week. We've got Yoko-san from Japan, originally based in Singapore, talking about halal supply chain and in Malaysia in particular. And we've got Kunal Gupta, who's originally from India and is now in Dubai working in this area. So how's that for an international conference? And the beauty is zero carbon footprint or almost no carbon footprint because all of us are calling in from different parts of the world on this international forum. So let me kick off our next panel discussion. We're going to be talking about cold chain and the opportunities for halal certified food products and production in this space. And with me on this panel, I've got Yokoyama-san, who works for the Halal Media Company Japan Limited. And as I mentioned earlier, Yoko-san used to live in Singapore and moved back to Japan recently, just in time for the Tokyo Olympics. So well done, good planning there. We've also got Kunal Gupta based in Dubai, and he's presently a specialist in food, beverage, supply chain management and procurement. And he heads the global supply chain for Batil Group, which has operations in over 11 countries from the US to the Middle East and Southeast Asia. And last but not least is a good friend and supporter of the Logistics Society, Mr. Michael Seymour, who's the Vice President and Managing Director for the Asia Pacific region at ROMB. Michael is also an active member of the Executive Committee of the Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society. So with that, thank you very much and welcome, gentlemen. And great to have you all on the panel.
Thank you.
All right. To kick us off, just a bit of an icebreaker, Yoko-san. Given your background, what started you or piqued your interest in halal or halal food products? Maybe you can share that with us.
Right. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity back to FIFB. Since I delivered a talk in 2016, I'm very glad to be back here. I'm Yokoyama, a co-founder of Food Diversity Incorporated. Previous name was Halal Media Japan Corporation Limited. Since I have stayed in Singapore for 10 years in total until 2018, I have many Muslim friends there who I would love them to bring to my beautiful mother country. So that is my interest on the halal industry since 2014. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Yoko-san. So what exactly are you doing in this space? You've renamed your organization. So what are you doing in the halal certified food products space?
Okay, yes, I'm working on the two main fields. One is I run a media company called Food Diversity Today, which provides the diverse food information in Japan, like halal, veggie, vegan, and others. The second one is consulting services. I'm working on the many government agencies like JETRO and the local government bodies, and even the universities. I'm a kind of the consultant to teach them how to cater to the people, how to cater the food to the guests who have the food restrictions visiting to Japan.
Okay, and I'm assuming it's a growing area, obviously, yes?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. The switching to you, Kunal. The halal supply chain is very diverse. Yeah? I did some work a few years ago in Indonesia, where they were even talking about halal refrigerators, halal appliances, medical technology devices, etc., etc. So it's a very diverse, and there's even some dissimilarities, say, between Malaysia and Indonesia, right? So what do you see as the main differences, if any, and in terms maybe opportunities as well, between the halal food supply chain in Asia versus the Middle East or even Africa, since you're opportunistically based in Dubai?
Yeah, thank you, Raymond. Yeah, and good afternoon, everyone. Good morning and afternoon, actually. So yeah, as Raymond mentioned, I had supply chain for Batil. We are one of the largest date production and sales organization, and we are probably the only one that deals in luxury dates. So basically starting from my current area of expertise, which is food. Now, based out of Middle East, the biggest difference I kind of figure out between Asia, Middle East, and Africa would be, this whole the difference in the geography and the demographics. Now, Middle East, by virtue of obviously having a majority of Muslim population, the halal certification becomes more like a mandate. I mean, I remember being in Singapore, you have two sides of a food court, that halal side and the non-halal side. While in Dubai, obviously, or in the whole region, there is no non-halal side. Yeah, so it's the only one side. Same for supermarket. I mean, there are very few supermarkets in the country where actually there is a small non-halal section. But otherwise, imagine 95, 98% of a supermarket is all halal. So that's the kind of spread I'm trying to point out in terms of difference that you have when it comes to this region, and that makes it not only interesting but also very challenging. So as you mentioned, halal is now going much more than just food. I mean, it's so halal. I mean, of course, traditionally halal used to be more to do with the method of slaughter when it comes to the animal product, but now it's become more to do with level of safety to avoid cross contamination, and so on and so forth. So it's more like it's become a mindset for people to understand that it's become synonymous to a clean label per se. So I think that's what it's predominantly how I would explain. Only thing is, with as the demographics of a region changes, there is the demand goes up and down based on how much attention and how much demand of that is in the region. So of course, Middle East probably is the highest. But having said that, I think Indonesia and Malaysia are equally as big. Like, we are undergoing currently halal certification as we speak, only so that we can export products to both Indonesia and Malaysia. And as you rightly mentioned, both actually have difference in the way we do the certification. So they have different bodies where they have kind of given us, the list of accreditation that we have to follow. So there are nuances. I mean, this is per se, as a global supply chain and logistician, I kind of feel that this is something we need to also come out with a common, a norm where it makes it easier rather than doing country by country. That's something I feel, we should be also looking at.
Yes, it's an interesting challenge, because like you correctly say, and I've experienced it as well. What is necessarily halal in Indonesia
Correct.
may not be seen as halal in Malaysia.
Correct.
Or vice versa.
Yes.
So you also mentioned, just going off on a slight tangent, some people see halal certification almost like a clean label.
Absolutely.
So is it your contention then that when something is halal certified, it's perceived to have a higher value or higher quality?
100%. So I'll give you an example. I mean, imagine dates. It's a natural fruit. You go to a supermarket. If I'm a new user, I see 4 products on a shelf. One of them is halal certified. As my basic intention would be, what, this would be better off than others, just for the sake that it's halal certified. Even if I'm a non-Muslim, in my mind, I will say that it has gone through at least that basic validation, no cross contamination, and so on and so forth. I mean, any process of certification obviously adds that little value. So we go through the whole organic certification, we go through halal certification. Now it's becoming more like, one of those mandatory or rather a certification when it comes to food that gives you that confidence as a consumer. So I definitely think it's a higher perceived value for sure.
Okay. What do you think of that, Yoko-san? Having halal certification increases the perceived value of the product.
That's very good example. Thank you very much, Kunal-san. That is very interesting because in Japan, as you may know, the halal is not so familiar yet to most of Japanese consumers. Even though some Japanese people like me know about halal is clean, so-called clean label. But the Japanese people, when they see the halal logo mark, halal certification logo mark, most of them may feel, oh, this service and product is not for me, is not for the other people, because they don't know about halal exactly or in detail. So that we are still in the process, the how to cater the halal certified food or halal friendly foods to Japanese consumers. That is why since 2015 or 2016, I always give advice to Malaysian and Asian companies who are SMEs, food manufacturers. Please do not promote halal so much. Please promote your product as Asian cuisine, Asian makan. That would be better because, as I mentioned, Japanese people, consumers, still don't know about the halal exactly. So this is the actual Japanese the market situation right now.
So it's amazing with what is perception. Yeah. So let me ask you, Michael, not so much as a supply chain expert, which you are, but as a consumer, you go to the supermarket and you want to buy dates, right? Fairly neutral product. I mean, it's whether they taste good or they don't. So are you oriented towards buying dates that are halal certified if you see it on the shelf?
I think it's a good question. You know, when I buy food, I've changed my mind. I'm having an 11-year-old daughter who educates me that it's important to buy biological, you know, organic, sustainable food. Although that's not halal, it's the same concept of looking for that label on the package that proves that that food has come from sustainable origins, that there's no, you know, unethical sort of employment, sort of child labor and things engaged. It's come from sustainable means, and that label certifies that product is safe and authentic. And I think that's very much the same as the halal label. And yes, when I do shop and I have 3 packets of dates, I will look for those labels. It's very common, the fishing in the fishing industry. Obviously, there's been a lot of news on the unsustainable fishing that's going on. And so there's organizations around that say that this fish comes from sustainable fishing. You should support that rather than the other. So, yeah, the branding is incredibly important.
All right. Thanks for that, Michael. Sticking with you, Michael. So there's been a lot of focus, especially the last year with COVID, right, on pharma and medical technology and medical devices and the whole medical supply chain and cold chain in particular. Has this also decreased or increased demand or focus on cold chain in halal certification and other areas as well?
So what's happened, obviously the focus has been on getting medical supplies to countries of the world, and a lot of the vaccines, obviously the importance was given to vaccines. They're almost 100% flown by air. But what's happened is there's been a massive change in sea freight and supply chain. Shipping companies have been caught off guard, not having enough containers because the whole supply chain has changed. There's been also a large increase in the demand for frozen food because countries are starting to stockpile food they didn't used to in the past. There's been a change in consumer behavior because restaurants are closing. So generally households are now buying more refrigerators, buying more freezers, up on food in case of, you know, the country's running out, supermarkets running out of food. We've seen them across the world. The toilet paper and ends up with pasta, you know, people run out. So yes, there has been a demand on the cold chain industry, particularly reefer containers. There's a shortage of reefer containers. Operators driving reefer trucks and having cold chain centers, depots have been, you know, in high demand. So yeah, the industry has seen a lot of increase of demand.
Okay, so perhaps for the other gentlemen on the panel here, Kunal and Yoko-san. So where are the less, you know, cold chain and the opportunities for food products and production? Has this increased because of COVID? What are you seeing in your respective areas?
Yeah, see for us, yeah, I'll go Yoko-san first. Yeah.
All right, definitely increase. Definitely increase. For example, looking at the turnover of a logistic company called Yamato, which is one of the largest logistic company in Japan.
Black
Their,
Cat.
their turnover last year was 15% increase year on year, 15%. Of course, this 15% is looks like not so big, but actually very big because their business based on the B2B, but now as you know, the B2B mostly suspended, stopped. So the consumer to consumer or the B2C as well. So the logistic business and I mean, especially because of the e-commerce market growing up. That is why the COVID-19 brought the very big the changes in Japan, even logistic market.
Thanks, Yoko-san. What about you, Kunal? What are you seeing?
Yes. So actually in the Middle East, especially say I'll talk about specifically UAE. Now 90% of our food is import. I mean, this is not a country where the weather permits a lot of production, especially the fresh produce and all. So it's mostly been flown in from Europe and other parts of the world. So with COVID, the scenario it was like a two-edged sword. What happened? How UAE operates, you always have 3, 4, 5 months of supply in the country. You have another 2, 3 months of supply always in transit from somewhere or the other. So that 6 months of inventory is built pipeline, and then you have some orders which are already placed with the vendors for manufacturing. Now, last year, all this it just suddenly came to a halt. A lot of restaurants were closed, and the country was obviously under lockdown, which led to a lot of wastage of food in the country for sure. But then immediately, the good thing in UAE is it bounced back very quickly. I mean, we were also among the first country to be fully open. So by end of summer, like early winter last year, October, November, we saw probably a peak which was bigger than 2019 in the food industry. Everybody wanted to come out, they wanted to eat out, and then the restaurants suddenly boomed. I think December 2020 was better than December 2019 for most businesses in UAE. So then again there was a spike, and irrespective of the freight prices, like Michael said, going over the roof, there is not much of an option. There was a whole refill that happened in the country. So it led to a huge spike in terms of, again, those containers flowing in. So somehow UAE, being that a country that depends so much on import, the food demand has been extremely high. And with the prices hitting the roof now, it's just not helping actually. It's become 2-3 times from pretty much most of the sectors.
Well, thanks for that, Kunal. Thanks, Yoko-san. So, we know some of the more obvious differences when it comes to cold chain logistics, right? Temperature excursions, for example, we want to maintain that consistency throughout the entire shipment of that product. Yeah? But what are some of the less obvious differences between cold chain versus normal logistics? For those of us in the audience who are not so familiar with this space, what are some of the less obvious things? Michael, maybe you want to start?
In terms of cold chain, I mean, obviously, when we look at the agricultural sector, they recommend, or we think that there's at least 6 to 8 parties, different parties from farm to fork. So that's 6 different companies actually involved in moving food. So unless you've got, first of all, visibility over those continuous partners, and then a sort of interconnected supply chain management system, visibility platform, it's very difficult to know which party is holding it. So as you pass the baton, do you know that the previous company actually kept your food at the right temperature and everything else? The other thing is about food safety. How do you know that your food not only is being kept in the right temperature to maintain its quality, but do you know that anyone's tampering with it? Counterfeit halal food has been out there for many, many years. We've recently had a scandal in Malaysia with imported beef that wasn't actually beef itself. It was applied with fake labels. So I think it's not just the cold chain that's important about the logistic food. It's the security. It's making sure that there's a a very secure chain of custody from farm to fork.
So an increase. It's more important. What you're saying is more important in your food supply chain to have that tracking and traceability and keeping the pureness or the originality of the product. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
And that can be helped with technology, not only with real-time visibility of companies such as ourselves, but there are companies out there that are blockchain, really encrypted end-to-end chain, where from the manufacturer, from the factory to the restaurant to the supermarket, where the consumer can actually scan the product with an app and see, is that the real product? Serialization, really important. The pharma industry has been doing this for years. The food industry has to catch up.
Well, here's then a bit of going off on a slight tangent here. You mentioned blockchain technology. I'm not sure if you had the chance to hear Marco when he delivered the keynote. And one of the things he said, or one of my takeaways from his presentation was, is blockchain technology perhaps really even necessary for many parts of the supply chain, or even in the food supply chain in this case? What do you think, panelists?
I think taking on from what Michael said, and Michael, I've actually used some Rombi products as a trial and done. So, I mean, that's the beginning of it, that's the start of it. I mean, to get such a beautiful IoT device, which can travel across boundaries and like I said, I mean, same example, take a farmer in Europe, man. I mean, there are lettuces that we buy. Most of them are actually produced out of Netherlands. Now, if that lettuce has a label which is, IoT enabled. So I know that when it's traveling from Netherlands to UAE, the whole journey has the data stored. And if at every touch point, like you said, there are at least 6 parties changing hands for the products. If each of them puts in their information either into that device or onto the blockchain, imagine as a consumer walking into a supermarket with your phone, just scanning that label, and it shows you're buying this lettuce which was produced 3 days back in this farm in Netherlands, and then it shows you all those 6 steps changing hands, gives that amount of confidence what you're eating. I think, like Michael, all of us with our kids growing up, they are bringing more awareness, than from our growing up times where label was never important. You look at the product and eat it, Now the label has become more important than the food. So I think with that coming in, I definitely feel without technology, it's just not possible. I mean, it's just not going to be with the whole globalization. How do you keep a track? So definitely blockchain is the way to go within supply chain. Of course, the question of affordability remains. I mean, thanks to Rombi, you have made IoT affordable. So, but
Michael,
I get to see blockchain affordable. So yeah.
Michael, you need to hire Kunal. I mean, it couldn't be a better plug for your company. He's mentioned Rombi twice in one breath.
Yes. And this wasn't pre-arranged, so thank you, Kunal. Thank you.
No, definitely wasn't pre-arranged. In fact, I think you gentlemen just met just before we started.
Oh yeah, I didn't know Michael. I mean, I have high regards. So I know their owners. So it's been really a good start. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, you couldn't have planned it better, Michael. Well, moving on. Yeah. So we've talked a bit about the challenges in cold chain logistics. Maybe we look at it because, with the diversity. Yoko-san, you're in Japan. You've got a lot of Asian experience, obviously. Kunal, you're from India originally, but based in Dubai. Yeah. And Michael, of course, you're practically Singaporean. You've been here for 22 years now. So what are some of the opportunities by geography, product, and mode or other areas? If I was a business owner, if I was a logistics company, either one or the other, where do you see some of the opportunities? Yoko-san.
Okay, I'd like to talk about 2 points. One is the product. Okay, plant-based product. I'm very, very keen, the most at moment. The second one is investment opportunity. If we talk about Japan, I'd like you to keen to look at the cold and chilled the facility to invest here in Japan because according to some research, 20 of chilled and cold logistic facilities in Japan are more than 40 years old. So now is the time to renovate. Thank you very much.
Okay. So if I'm a REIT or a real estate developer, look at investing in cold chain in Japan, yeah?
Yes,
And plant-based products. Okay, interesting. Thanks, Yoko-san. What about yourself, Kunal? What would you say?
So I would say more of the sustainable means of growing food. And that's been something which is on a very, very high importance and radar in UAE. So the whole basically hydroponics and vertical farming, that's the way to go. And again, going back to Netherlands, probably they are among the pioneers in making sure it's not only just hydroponics and sustainability, it's about use of technology now in the food industry. Now, whether use of that technology is to make that lab grown meat, as you call as, the plant-based. I mean, I know Singapore has been pioneer in that and they're trying to do that as well. So
it's a bad idea.
Yes, I mean, the way we are going, I always use this, my favorite example. We will be touching almost 10 million people by 2050, and in next 30 years, we need the amount of food to be grown on this planet, which we have not done in last 8 centuries. So that gives an idea of what is the kind of the tension we are putting on the resources that we have on the planet. So I think the whole idea is how we can grow more food to feed everybody on earth more sustainably. I think that's probably the biggest key takeaway for me that we should be looking at. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you very much. And yourself, Michael.
Well, I think very, very much to the point of Kunal. I think sustainable food. Let's buy local, grow local. We've seen the difficulties during the COVID that supply chain is disrupted overnight. Airlines shut down, shipping companies scramble. I think countries can start looking at producing not only their own pharmaceuticals but their own food in the local market. Singapore's trying the 30% of the food by 2030. As Kunal said, hydroponics. We should probably all eat less as well. I think that's something that we benefit from.
Point, Michael.
The other point to Yoko-san's on infrastructure, the vaccination program that we see ongoing around the world now is not going to end. It's going to continue. There'll be boosters. There'll be ongoing. So the infrastructure that has been put up there has to be sustainable and secure. UNICEF did a study recently where they found that over 300 facilities in Asia are basically, again, over 20 years old and need upgrading in terms of storage facilities, logistics, supply chain, everything else. So there's opportunities in that space as well.
All right. I've just been prompted by the guys in the back saying that we're out of time. So in the interest of time, quick 30-second takeaway. The panel is on cold chain and the opportunities for halal certified food products and production. Quick 30 seconds, Kunal. What are your parting words to the audience?
I think I'll just summarize what I've been saying, that we should be looking at halal as more like a clean label. There should be a little more understanding and knowledge to what halal certification means. I think that's a little less prevalent in all part of world, like Yoko-san said. It's just not a certificate only for Muslims. I mean, it is, if anything, it's more inclusive rather than exclusive. So that's my only giveaway to the audience, that you shouldn't be looking at it as something that if I'm not a Muslim, I'm not going to eat halal. It's right. More of the awareness that I'd like to drive, that it's a very clean label kind of a product. So whether it's a meat, non-meat, we should be looking at that.
Thank you, Kunal. And yourself, Yoko-san.
Okay, my message is the respect others and enjoy diversity.
Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Thanks, Yoko-san. Okay. And Michael?
It has to be technology. Never have we seen so much power in the hands of the consumer. And if you bring that power of choice that the consumer has that drives business today, and add on technology where they can actually authenticate the product that they pick up in the supermarket, that's very powerful. So, bring on the technology. Let's make sure that we can keep the bad guys out of the market. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Michael from Germany, Yoko-san in Japan, and Kunal in Dubai. Great panel session, and thank you very much for your participation today.
Thanks for having us.
You've been a great host.
Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you.
All right, so moving right along, to help bring us back on track, our next panelist or presenter actually needs no introduction. And I don't think I can do him justice with all his accolades and his achievements. We have Encik Azizi Na. Azizi is a widely respected Malaysian business leader with extensive experience in corporate management and in nurturing startup companies. Encik Azizi has been recognized as a supply chain specialist with focus on food safety standards and certification complete across various parts of the supply chain. So with that, over to you, Encik Azizi.
Hello. Hi, Raymond. Hello. You can hear me, yeah?
Yes, we can hear you. Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you for the kind introduction. Do I start my talk now?
Yes, please.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Well, it's quite an elaborate topic, you know. Malaysia and the continued development is an open-ended thing. Sometimes I had a big headache, you know, trying to put things together. Anyway, since we say it's continued development, then I can put in my own idea, irrespective. All right. Now, this will be my presentation flow. Of course, I start with the halal market first. Halal started as a niche or very conservative market. Suddenly it's gone to mass market. So there's a lot of changes structurally.
Azizi, could you share your screen with us, please? Huh? Share screen. We can't see your presentation.
Oh, really? Hey. Hang on. Huh?
No problem.
Share. They couldn't see my screen. Share. Where's the share screen? Share. Yeah. Can you see that now?
Yes, we can. If you can go to full screen, that's perfect.
Hang on. Slideshow, is it? Okay. Is that on? Is that okay?
Yes, it is. Fantastic.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. I'll the flow will be. I will talk about the halal market, starting from a niche market when it was still at the early phase. Now it's gone to mass market, and of course there's a lot of changes in the structure of the industry which nobody noticed, and this is why I think we're having some problem with delivery or in terms of integrity. Now, of course, the second part I will cover something on the problems, and I will define some problem statement. How do we need to redefine the industry back? Then I will move into the supplanting the digital technology over the old analog halal process, because the key driver will be the digital technology. And the other part is I will cover on the halal assurance. This is key to the whole thing now, because I'll show some slide where there's some violation of halal in a big way. And of course, there is an alternative way, trying to build a regional or global platform for halal using the single window initiatives. And then I will propose a physical hub, halal global supply chain hub. And of course, towards the end, I'll talk about some other disruptive element to the supply chain. Okay. Wow. Now I'm not able to move my slide now. Okay, you're quite aware about the size of the halal market. The Malaysian one is quite substantial now, from 51.9 billion to projected to be 82.5 billion by 2030. And the total halal market, actually, it's about, earlier I was covering food and beverage, but the full halal market will be 113 billion US by 2030. And at the moment, our halal export value is about 40.8 billion ringgit, or it's about 10 US billion. So basically, Malaysia is a net importer of halal products. Now, if you look at the global halal market, now the bulk of the market is in the Middle Eastern, North Africa, and the Asia Pacific, because these are the concentration of the Muslim population, and also most of these countries, particularly in Middle Eastern, they are more of a consuming country. They are not producing. Therefore, there's a big market over there, the demand over there, and as the other key drivers, the Muslim population is also expanding. It's 1.8 billion in 2019 and expected to go to 2 billion by 2030. So they form 24% of the world population. It's quite substantial. And I mentioned about the market, and the global market for it is one big chunk, which is 113 trillion from 2018 to USD 2.5 trillion in 2024. So I think there's no dispute about the importance and the interest people have shown in halal. But the issue now is something we will cover in a while. Now, this is the overarching problem. There are major issues. Halal market is a bit fragmented. As you can see, they're operating in silos. Because you have three segments there: upstream, midstream, downstream, and all these are operating on their own. So there's no connectivity sometimes. If there's any product recall or if there is any crisis, it's so difficult to go back and check where the thing went wrong. Okay? And halal integrity, it's another issue, because a lot of countries are issuing halal certificate, particularly non-Muslim countries. They are bigger producer, but they also issue a lot of halal certificate, whereas compared to Malaysia, we've got only one body, JAKIM, the certifying body. So is Indonesia, there's one body, MUI. So is in Thailand, SICOT. But there are countries that issue too many certificates and people get confused. I think partly they're trying to meet the other markets requirement in terms of halal certification. So that's the reason why there are so many variables. So this is a bit of an issue, causing a lot of confusion in the market. And of course, in the absence of a universal halal standard, that is the cause of it, because the Muslim thought leaders from the 4 different sects, they have not come to term to come up with a unified standard yet. So on the minor issue, there's some statement by Harun Latif, who was an MD of Orchard Way Capital, who said that 40% of all food and beverage consumed by Muslims worldwide is not authentically certified halal. That's quite a big statement. And I'll show you 3 cases of halal violation, which is really happening. And a lot of, it's difficult to harmonize the standard right now, because a lot of countries are declaring their own standard, which is a sovereign standard, as a de facto standard. And you need to have a lot of mutual trade agreement in order to harmonize the halal trade. And of course, right now, because of the broken supply chain, provenance is a big issue in terms of tracing the inputs or the ingredient, where they come from. And in fact, there is an opportunity to integrate the halal process with the digital technology, example like using blockchain, but it's not happening yet. Maybe there is no offtake yet at the moment. All right. Now, that leaves me with one mission that you gave me, to make Malaysia and the continued development. I like that thing. It gave me an open opportunity there, as a regional and global halal supply chain hub. Okay, let's look a bit of a problem there and challenge it. Problem, halal integrity. Can the conventional halal food chain infrastructure, we're talking about the existing analog pipeline, still maintain its resilience and integrity with the increase in global sourcing, production, advanced manufacturing, logistics in halal? Because market seems to progress, but the infrastructure not necessarily is happening. Now, then we got another issue of coming up with a unified halal certification. Now, I was also wondering whether with the 4IR or digital technology platform, which is very transparent and connected, can this be a common denominator for the 4 Islamic sect group to agree, that halal supply chain must go digital, and whatever additional condition they want to do on the certification, they can put on it. At least we have the the pipeline very clear and transparent. So that's one of the suggestions that I have. And now this is where I mentioned about the food fraud. Everybody is quite aware. I think in 2014, I think Cadbury has an issue with halal. There's a pork DNA found on their halal packet, and it took Jakim about 9 days to understudy the whole thing and declare that the report is not true. In the meantime, Cadbury has withdrew all the chocolate. They have to destroy some of it. I mean most of it, and then they have to rebrand back, repackage back, and I tell you the amount of money it cost them is a bomb. You're looking at something like US 32 million, the damage done, for that 9 days of delay. If you have on digital product recall, you can do it within few minutes or within 1 or 2 hours. You will know where the problem came from because you have the traceability system. Now, recently, we had a big problem in this country, Malaysia, where the imported beef was mentioned it was mixed with horse meat or kangaroo meat and even disease meat. So that is still under investigation, I think, and this is why there's no transparency or the supply chain is so important, particularly on the halal assurance. Now, PwC wrote as far back as 2016 about fraud on halal food. Nobody noticed this report. There was no statistic given. I didn't see, but the report was quite comprehensive about the issue of trust in halal food. So I think there you are. The expansion of the halal market globally doesn't mean that everything is under control. So this issue we need to address. Now, removing the barriers to transform halal supply chain from the legacy or analog system to one of a pervasive digital technology, you need to reinvent the whole value chain. Now, I will start with the design the framework for the halal integrity. What is required to maintain the halal integrity? There are 4 pillars here. Traceability, I mentioned just now, is so important, and you cannot, if there's a product recall, remember the old method of 1 up, 1 down. For you to investigate, it will take weeks and months, and some of the data are paper-based. You can't verify sometimes. So that's why you need to go into digital, and smart contract and blockchain now will be very handy in this respect. Now, the other thing is issue about asset specificity. This is about when you have a halal pipeline, it has to be dedicated, whether it's a production line, whether it's in a farm, whether manufacturing, whether in storage, transportation, or even forklift has to be a segregated forklift. So that segregation is something can be quite difficult for SME or smaller company who doesn't have volume. And this is something we need to address, and I think there are ways and means to address using technology. Anyway, my platform of making changes in the chain will be technology. So now halal assurance. This is something that quite important also. What happened about 3 cases that I mentioned just now. If it is on blockchain or on digital, you can easily do online audit, and you can arrest the problem before it becomes a big issue. Because some of the content or data in blockchain is immutability, something that you can't change. So this is one way, to maintain the halal assurance. And of course, the other part is the trust and commitment, because along the supply chain there are so many stakeholders, and some are useful, some are adding cost but not adding value. So we need to sort out some of the stakeholders within the halal supply chain, so that there won't be any information asymmetry. At the same time, you won't have any freeloaders in the chain. So that is the sort of framework to cover on the halal integrity. Now, when you go to digital transformation, of course, like many of you are aware that there are 4 elements here. You got AI plays a big part, where you need to do robotic, you need even machine learning. But at the same time, you even have neural network, something that when you go into image processing later on, which is quite important in a remote location, especially in a slaughterhouse. Big data. Without big data, there's no analytic. And then the Internet of Things, collecting data in the open. How do you turn image into data? So you need this Internet of Things, IoT, and of course cloud computing. Because of cloud computing, we're able to do so many things from from end-to-end supply chain because of and you can even get the output from the handphone, you know, as far as that. So I think these are the 4 elements that we need to consider. Now, when again, now the whole supply chain, there are attempts by, you know, even in Dubai, International Halal Accreditation Forum, they have about 37 members. They're trying to, you know, create this mutual arrangement, mutual recognition, trade mutual agreement, and then plus make in Turkey, OIC, they are doing this halal quality infrastructure and standards for member countries. And Indonesia, they are looking to halal certification mandatory. They call it Halal Product Certification Agency. I remember when you send Malaysian halal product to Indonesia, you already got halal logo Malaysian. Now you have to put another Indonesian logo on it. So I think these are not really a transformation. These are very incremental changes, which is quite important because you're getting the religious leader to start talking to each other. Now, but there was a research paper written by Dr. Albert Tan and me, plus Gligor, about the using blockchain to cover the 3 important elements in the supply chain, upstream, midstream, and downstream. And I will mention it in a while, and their role and how we can put the supply chain connectivity end to end. And of course, I will bring in the single window issue later on, because this is very popular. 20 countries in the world are using it, including US. And there are so many bilateral agreement, sectoral agreement rather than the core agreement, core services, rather than custom, immigration. You got other sectoral agreement between industry in each country that they, you know, they have a mutual agreement, example like halal certificate, health certificate. So this open the door for us to put halal blockchain, halal supply chain through the single window. All right. Now this is example of the existing, I call it analog supply chain. Beef, this is an example, I took beef because beef is one of the most complex and very long supply chain. And you can see on the left farm environment, and then you can see the from here grazing, fattening animal, then you take it to the slaughterhouse. From there, if you want to do value adding, you want to go, then you take this pathway. Otherwise, you go straight to the wholesale market, or you take it to the halal park, or, you know, to the butcher shop, and you know, break the animal up into parts. I think. Now, and of course, from the warehouse, you can go down to the airport for export. So this is the conventional one. It's just to supplant it, to make it digital, but not necessarily complete, because there are certain overlapping function that that can be, you know, that can be reduced to make the pipeline more efficient and dynamic. So I'm over to the next slide. Now this is the horizontal look. Now if you notice here, there are 3 vertical markers. This is fresh market, fresh beef. This is frozen. This is processed. So if you look at the beef supply chain from the farm right down to the supermarket display, is a very long one, you know. And there is no company that I know of in the world that does end to end, you know, from rearing cattle, including I mean, supplying animal feed, so on and so forth, and right down to this. So it is quite a long journey. And when you put in, when you put in halal, you know, factor in it, it becomes more complicated. So if you look at the upstream here, I'm putting, let's say, food chain, a company that I'm more familiar, and then you know, they will collect data. This is the most difficult part, because a lot of this part are people-based. You need to digitize it. That's why you bring in IoT, you bring in all those latest digital stuff to collect the information. And of course, once you get the meat frozen, salted and frozen, you can take it to the halal park or wherever manufacturing center. And here you will also do the testing on the ingredient, where they come from, the authenticity of the ingredient, so that you know they're halal. And of course, from here after manufacturing, you put in a different segregated warehouse and transportation and out to the market. So here you have what's halal. They are good at certifying the halal standard, certify the halal supply chain. And Haladina, these 2 are Singapore company. The Haladina is more confined to e-commerce, you know. they are good in looking at the market and looking at the market requirement. So if you put these three parties together, then you can supply. You can cover the whole supply chain. But the issue now is who's going to manage these three parties? Who? Because looks like cross border. It's not within Malaysia alone. So this is something that we need to be aware of. The food chain is a company based in Italy, specialized in upstream. What's Halal, Singapore based, like I said, specialized in halal traceability and streamlining the halal processes, and Haladina would be more on the e-commerce. So those are the three players. Now, when you map the whole thing out, the first 2-3 slides, this is what you can see. This is the blockchain mapping. If you look at the vertical here, state, technology, data captured, and here is the horizontal supply chain, farm, animal harvested, processing, transit, and so on and so forth. So you bring them all together into one map so that you know what exactly data you want to capture, what technology required, and how do you do the integration. So this is an example of, and bring it down, from 20,000 feet down to about 4 or 5 feet, so that you can see exactly how the blockchain, operate on the ground. Okay, there are some improvement or some innovation going on, like Belfood in Indonesia. They are working with McDonald's on the food traceability. I think this year they're coming up with a master plan. They're looking into halal traceability using IoT, blockchain, fintech, and big data, standard accreditation between countries when they do halal trade. So, and they're moving into halal service provider, so which is quite good, rather than doing policy and industry development alone. Now, South Korea, Telco, KT, they have a company called B Square. They are also looking at simplify the halal certification authentication. I think this integrity part is quite important now. Everybody seems to be tackling that. And what's Halal also doing the same thing. They are operating in Indonesia now, looking at the same thing, halal certification, enterprise solution, and authentication. Okay. Now, if you look at the future state, when you bring all the blockchain technology together, you look at this is the physical line. This is all the standards below it, whatever standard, you got from GAP, MS 1500, 1502, then you got the HACCP, good, what do you call that? Animal husbandry practices, HACCP, and then you got, many other standards, And then you have IoT connected, and connected to the ERP. This is where this thing, and then connect to the blockchain up here. And from the blockchain, you connect to the government agencies or regulatory bodies through a smart contract, and put it to the cloud. This is what I meant just now earlier. The 4 pillars of digital transformation, from big data, cloud, computing, IoT, and AI. Now, there is another development. They call it a supply chain as a service. This apply to companies like SME. They cannot afford to have their own internal supply chain team. You can outsource it, and they go very detailed, including advice to the organization on how to improve on the halal pipeline, including visualization, including tracking and tracing. So this is something interesting development, and even the logistics you can delegate to 3PL to do it. So a company that produces food may just want to focus on food production, and the supply chain management and the logistics will be it can be outsourced. And of course, we're all familiar with food as a service. There's a lot of company like Grab, sending food out instead of online. Instead of offline, it's online. A lot of retail shops are not opening. So this pandemic has opened up a new frontier. So that again, to a certain extent, will disrupt the present supply chain. And you need to bring in some of this new input into the supply chain. So therefore, the time to change is now. All right. Now, I mentioned about the single window just now, because we can use that as a pipeline also to push halal through, because the single window, they have more or less sanitized part of the conduit. They have made clearance with so many government agency. You can see some I mentioned up to it. Example like here, New Zealand and Australia have already made special arrangement with Malaysia on the mutual animal health certificate, halal certificate, phytosanitary, SPS, and then cities, this is the wildlife permit. So they are bringing in not just the government policy about custom immigration, but they also bring in some commercial element into the single window. And of course, single window, as you know, by their function, they streamline efficiently, the import and export processor. They reduce the paperwork, become single window document, and then you decrease the cost of operation. So I mean, they're already there. Why don't you take a piggyback right on that? And of course, when you have a blockchain platform, you're going between platform to platform. So it's quite easy, we're talking about interoperability using API. I mean, there's no issue. The system can talk to each other. All right. Now, this is another model of single window in US. They call it Automated Commercial Environment, or ACE. And you can look one side, this is the trading partners, B2B. One side here are the partners with the government agency, maybe 40, 50 government agencies. So they have ironed out all the agreement, whatever, and the paperwork in particular. Because you don't have to apply, each time you apply to different agency, you got to repeat the same form. This is all done in one. And in between there, you have this ABI, Automated Broker Interface. The same thing is happening while they are focused on border custom protection. They have this ABI to look after these two parties, so that their players they can operate independently, All right, that is now this is the example of the one in Malaysia, which is DagangNet. In fact, SealNet just launched their services yesterday, officially new services. I had the opportunity to speak to them. And of course, from the single window, you look at the manifest, all this airway bill and whatever bill, and then this special permit. This is important, the certificate of origin, Yeah, especially when you deal with food, agriculture, this is key. And then of course, custom declaration, the payment, whatever payment duties due, and then the permit. Now, if you look at the permit here, there is grading, packaging, labeling under pharma, agriculture. So they have even incorporated that in this thing. And of course, the single window, they work with other ASEAN member service provider, the banks, insurance, port operators, free zone, authority, terminal operator, custom and duties, and other government agencies. So they are quite complete organization to encourage trade between countries. Now, this is an example of from a national to a regional ASEAN single window there. You get all these very interesting ATIGA formula, ACDD, FITO, everything is there, health certificate, food safety certificate, halal certificate, and this is all the special requests from different countries based on sectoral requirement. So I think this is another channel that we can use, to trade halal globally. Now, of course, when I talk about virtual hub, it's a bit difficult to believe. So then I want to locate into a physical hub, So I was looking for a site which is suitable for the team to develop and then replicate it all over the world. So one area that I thought which is interesting, it would be Senai, because they have a Senai airport there, supposed to be halal airport, I was told. And then you got PTP there, you got Johor Port, and then of course you got across the causeway, you got Singapore with all the facilities in the world. Could this be another physical supply halal supply chain hub? So could it be? And if you look on the right side, all the features about logistic, agglomeration of service providers are all there. And so this is something that I'll be looking at. And if you look into the function of this, what do you call that? Senai Hub, Senai Halal Hub, just look at the Michael Porter value chain analysis. You have all the verticals and horizontal services. And then you have the G2G there, Government Singapore and Malaysia, biosecurity, border security, biosecurity, environment governance, stakeholder, policy and regulation, and you get all the incentive up there. So I think the single window here is quite comprehensive in terms of using it as a hub, a physical hub, and link it with the virtual. Okay, now if we look at the whole single window ecosystem that you can see there, in the center will be the hub and surrounded by all the agency that you can link with with smart contract, and you can interface quite easily, efficiently. So I think this is just one example that I thought we could use to promote Malaysia as a regional and global halal hub. Now, this is one slide which I thought was quite important to discuss, because there is another development in the food industry. This is a report done by Rethink X. Now, they're looking at food as a software, meaning conventionally, the cattle will be here. Then you break into tissue, organ, ground meat. Then you come out with a single molecule. If you want to come out with insulin, collagen, but it's a very expensive process because and this is the pathway for milk pasteurized before you come into a single molecule like casein. Whereas under the if you are familiar with the Beyond Burger or Impossible Food, this is the pathway they took from precision fermentation, come up with single protein molecule, and then you boil up the product. That's why they call it food as a software. You can bring all the other ingredient in to design the food, maybe for people with high blood pressure, with diabetes. You can design food in a cheaper way, this way, compared to this method here. You want to extract insulin or you want to extract heparin, for open heart surgery. You come from maybe 20-30 kilos of tissue or what do you call that, intestine, but you may get only 1 or 2 cc of heparin. But this one is a more efficient way. So this is the future way of producing meat, plant-based meat. Now, this can be done in a decentralized plant. You don't need a big farm, to rear the animal, to grow animal feed, and then this cattle will bring in all the methane, exhaust. They emit a lot of methane gas. This is cleaner, cheaper, and you'll be surprised. And I've just checked the Impossible Burger is halal certified. Now this is interesting in the sense you look at how much changes they do to the supply chain. You don't go around and see big farm anymore. You can see this decentralized plant producing plant-based food, and this is good for the Middle Eastern. They don't have farm. They need to bring this factory, bring in the single molecule, and build up the food from there. So you change the dynamics and the whole thing about halal food production or supply chain, so on and so forth. So this is something to watch, and I think Singapore Temasek is invested in this company too, Impossible Burger, and so is China. So I think people are looking into it, and I've tasted it. I bought it myself. Though expensive now. Okay, you can get away with it, but it may not be as good as the original beef. But why not? It's healthier. So this is one aspect of future disruption, which I thought you can creep into the halal supply chain. Okay, my this thing. In conclusion, I already mentioned just now, halal started as a niche market, gone into mass market, and the growth is so unprecedented, and they've forgotten to look at the pipeline. How strong the pipeline is to cater for the burgeoning of halal market. And of course, now we are stuck with legacy issue. How do we digitize the whole system so that we become more efficient, more give a lot of convenience as well. And then we need to inject digital transformation in it. And of course, the issue about governance of halal integrity, that is also quite important. That can be handled by technology also, because you can get information quite rapidly, and you will know what happened. You get all the data to tell you what happened. Along the pipeline, and of course you democratize the chain, because sometimes they accuse Allah of being a bit biased. In the sense, it's like a protected business. It's not so so now with this you can democratize, because you can bring in supply chain as a service, food as a service, and so forth. And of course the presence of the single window, they can help to extend the halal supply chain to another dimension. And of course we need to be very conscious about this plant-based halal food and how they disrupt the industry, including the supply chain. So with that, except my takeaway point is again is to remind the leaders of the Muslim of different sect, of 4 sect, about having to agree, to come up with what they call that, universal supply halal certification, so that you can create less confusion. Just like if you have ISO or if you have global gap. Now these are standard thing, and it's a bit easy, for to do assessment. And of course, all these standards are non-tariff barrier, but they're also part of market access. Without the standard, you have no market access. So that's why certification is quite important for market access purposes. And also, there are many pockets of halal park coming up now. In Indonesia, you got one. I think China, you have Yangliang in Xi'an, China. Western Cape, South Africa, you have Halal Industrial Park there. And then you have in Dubai, Halal Trade Marketing Center. And then one Agrics, I think it's Singapore company, they are quite busy in Africa also, Korea. So I think there are pockets of this thing that you can link up into a consortium or knowledge exchange on halal. And of course, the last part is how to bring up the SME on board, into this halal global supply chain. So I think this digital thing and supply chain as a service will be helpful. So thank you very much. I end my presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Azizi. Fascinating.
I was right on time, or I've taken more time than necessary?
No, you've taken more time, but still very fascinating. Over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ramon. It's been a fascinating discussion. I am now going to host the takeaway panel. My name is Joe Lombardo. I'm the editor of the LogiSYM magazine. And it's my pleasure to host the takeaway panel with some eminent people. We have Azizi Mio with us, the last speaker. We have also Dr. Marco Chichiman, who gave us the keynote speech. Thank you, Marco, for joining us. We have Stephanie Krishna, who managed the technology panel, and we have Dr. Ramon Krishna, who also managed the cold chain panel. Thank you all very much for staying back and going through this discussion. So it was a fascinating round-robin discussion about many, many different topics of the supply chain: technology, standards, cold chain, clusters, barriers, a number of provocative ideas in terms of localization, agricultural concepts, etc. But I'd like to come down to some synthesis, because Dr. Marco, if I can start with you, you talked about the clusters, the halal parks, which I believe is conceived as being the energizers of the halal supply chain, where you're creating some infrastructure, you're creating some clarity. And with your new Halal Park 2.0, you're adding more components of that. How do you think, having heard the different arguments in terms of the discussion on the technology, the complexity, and then we come to Mr. Aziz's presentation, where he put a very comprehensive architecture. But looking at all the obstacles, complexity, how do you think the clusters are driving through this myriad of obstacles?
Thank you, Joe. I think it's good to realize that with the halal supply chain, we make halal not necessarily easier. So I think as there are different market requirements, that the Saudi market requirements are very different from Indonesia and Malaysia, and we have to respect those different requirements. We need to simplify the halal ecosystem. And I have been proposing a new model to organize a halal park more comprehensive, so that it allows you to simplify halal, put the key players, a big part of the supply chain together. And Injik Azizi also suggests very practical, okay, let's do that in Malaysia. Senai has a great logistic infrastructure, key ports that are aware of halal logistics. Let's do it in a small scale and further expand it on there. So I think the halal ecosystem, the halal park, I think will be an important component of halal ecosystems in Malaysia and also in other parts of the world. And to simplify halal, to create also innovation and further develop those SMEs as well.
Yeah. So I think what we've been talking about, and everybody, each of you in your panels and also in your presentations, you are basically alluding to two major drivers. One is an industry transformation, where we're looking at infrastructure, we're looking at technology, looking at security, standards, etc. And then we're looking at the business models of the suppliers. Azizi, in your presentation, you made some very, very specific illustrations on this, but some of them are quite complex. If we want to start and make some impact on this, do you think there is an avenue to start the transformation and in parallel change the mindset of the suppliers, of the players in the market to meet and converge in something that is more sustainable and more practical? Because at this rate, it's going to take many, many more years. And having said that, the halal supply chain has made huge steps forward, but still a long way to go. What do you think about this complexity factor?
Well, there was at one point in time, I did a presentation to the Iskandar Halal Park, which is under the land, the to use blockchain first cut, because I think the key thing in halal, before we go big, is the traceability. And I think I always worry, wherever I eat anything, even you have on the label, to show how reliable is the label. And now you have even QR code, you can go backward and look at provenance. So I think if it's confined within a park, you can control, you can put a lot of rules and regulations, particularly, in a halal park. And of course, now there are other issues we need to bring in the halal ecosystem, things like sustainability, carbon footprint. All these things must be measured in, So everything can be put in the model in a park. And from there, you can bring it up to, you can replicate the park everywhere using the same model, put all those things. Then it's easy to because people will use that as the model to copy. And I think a lot of countries, even China, they're all interested. The thing is that somebody need to design the park in a way. I mean, I remember the Kalundborg template, the one in Denmark, the first eco park, So I think we need to move into that. We cannot wait and do part by part. Take into something big. Take a proper halal park. If you got one in Indonesia coming up, put in all those elements in there to become a model. Sure. So once you replicate everywhere, it's a bit easier.
But I come back to Dr. Marco on this point, because clearly we should do, we can do, we may do are all good statements. But sure. When does the point change where we need to do and we've got to do it? When does that urgency start to trigger? Because if we put everything on offer, it will never be taken. People will not take it because maybe there isn't a sponsor of the problem to move us forward. Marco, what do you see as the buy-in in your project in the Halal Park 2, etc.?
I think the urgency, if you talk about the urgency, I think there are two components. So I think one is we have seen the halal crisis over the past years. We had the halal meat cartel scandal in Malaysia. Also other brand owners that saw their revenues and corporate reputation disappear. So I think on the brand owners is an important driver. But also as highlighted by Injik Azizi, but also Dr. Rashdi in the earlier discussion was the element of sustainability. So now everywhere in the world we have those UN Sustainable Development Goals being rolled out and put in regulation. From the halal point of view, I would like to share the Green Deen, the book written in 2010 already by Ibrahim Abdul Martin about how Islam teaches about how to protect the planet. In here it's written about protecting water, talking about energy from heaven, energy from hell, and also the aspect of waste. So I think from the sustainability aspect, I think there's the second urgency where we need to create a more inclusive halal ecosystem where, like in Indonesia, we also look at water management, for example, and sustainability. So I think that can be very well integrated in those halal park, and it is very well in line with also the Islamic teaching.
Sure. Thank you, Mark, for that.
Joe, if I could just add something there.
I was going to come to you. Go ahead. Come to you.
Yeah, because I mean, ultimately, this is going to happen when the rubber hits the road, right? When it costs people money or they run the risk of losing money. We've heard two examples today. One was where a company was accused of being non-halal and not having halal practices, and it took them several months to prove that. that they were actually halal compliant and they never recovered. And I think that was the chocolate factory example that we heard. Ultimately, if you invest technology, you're going to be able to recover from that faster and therefore minimize the damage that it's going to cause in the industry. Second is the next generation that is coming through. And while that may be a slower change, we're already starting to see demand around that. We're seeing similar impact from a sustainability perspective, where if you don't do it, you lose deals. Right. I was on a call last week with a semiconductor firm that's losing deals because they're not green enough. They're considered to be, greenwashing. So if you are not halal enough, I can see a similar aspect happening. The young people are going to demand it, and they're going to step up and do the technology that's going to drive it. In our conversation, we talked about having, young people that are technology focused, actually putting together logistics companies and getting the right logistics knowledge, the right, religious knowledge in to help guide them through that journey. So I think there's going to be a number of factors that do help it, and it's going to be you compete or get out of the way, you do it or you lose money, or you comply or you will suffer the consequences. So ultimately, it's going to be you have to do it or you will not be able to move forward.
Steph, your panel was particularly interesting because you talked about the technology is there, the solutions are there, the expertise is there. The understanding is there, the costs are coming down rapidly, but yet there is not a take-up, there's no buy-in. And how can we increase the velocity of this buy-in of technology in the parks, in the model that Aziz was putting forward, to really get the buy-in? Because here we're talking about the icing on the cake, but the cake is still not ready to ice. How do we drive this forward?
Look, ultimately, we're seeing this in the industry as a whole. And if we start with manufacturers, we tend to be, manufacturing and logistics do tend to be slow when it comes to the uptake of technology. However, I think because of COVID, they're not going to survive unless they do. And I think similarly, we're going to see, implications of that as companies seek to remain competitive, to be able to maintain their space in the markets. When you have initiatives like was discussed on our panel, where you've got Pakistan investing in those sort of technologies so that they're able to put that traceability in place and then compete on a global scale, you're going to have no choice, right? Ultimately at IDC, we're seeing that one of the main impetus for doing this is the increased competition. And this increased competition is not just coming from a local market, it's coming from international markets. So it's something that organizations need to pay attention to.
Yeah. Okay, I need to come back to another point, because localization of production was something that was quite strong in both panels, the cold chain panel and technology panel. And I think also Azizi mentioned this in his presentation. But the perception of local production grown in towers and hydroponics processes are still a bit skeptical. Azizi, how do you think we can break this myth that to say that if we grow vegetables and fruit in hydroponic sort of environments, it's safe, it's green, it's halal? How do we break this mindset that it's not going to the ground, etc., to achieve the goal of localization?
Well, I've personally done vertical farming or high-tech farming up in Cameron Highland, quite a big, sizable. I think the key thing is you must observe the standards. You see, when I started putting my product into the supermarket shelf, it was quite difficult in the sense, there are many established players. But what I did, I put emphasis on quality. This is GAP compliant. This is HACCP, a GMP factory, and they come and inspect. And within a year or two, I took over 65% of the supermarket share. I think the people are very conscious and concerned about the healthy thing. And there's a lot of shortcuts, in agriculture. If you would, I can tell you, I was a planter before. And again, coming back to your question, can I start track a bit? One way to punish, even experienced player like even palm oil, is market access. You put your condition. You are not meeting this. For example, you are doing deforestation. You are not treating the workers well. You put that condition up. Then you will discipline people. Because if you lose your market or your brand, you will be under a lot of pressure. Same thing, when I put in my quality, is part of my branding strategy, and you have to spend money, just to
the palm oil was a typical example because it's very much land-based. It's Malaysia. But when you got suppliers from all over the place, you got a bigger ecosystem of supply, you can't impose those because you start creating unfair competition. What other ways could there be that we can actually either compensate or penalize big brands? Because Marco said the brand owner should take the lead. But you know, the brand owners are also looking at the economic of scale. So, for example, you tell them, "Oh, don't produce anymore in Timbuktu. Start to produce in Malaysia or Singapore, or Thailand or Indonesia, where you can actually go to these new technologies." It's going to cost them more investment. It may cost them more in terms of fragmenting the scale, economies of scale. So, what's the incentive? So, how do we reconcile that? So, Ramon, if I can ask you, because looking at the big picture of giant supply chains. If I come to you as a big supplier, a big company, I say, Ramon, I want you now, for the sake of the green label and supply chain and halal, etc. Can you fragment your supply chain, start breaking up your thing? You tell me, take a hike and ride. But what would make you happy if I came and give you some incentive?
Well, I think, Joe, I was listening to what Stephanie said, and I was listening to what Azizi said. Both very valid comments and arguments, yeah? But I also look at it from a slightly different perspective. If you want to talk about technology in your supply chain, you also need to consider, where do you want to sit in your market? Do you want to be a market follower, a leader, a laggard? You know, and we've talked about this a couple of times. Off the top of my head, I can think of 3 multi-billion-dollar companies. One in the semicon space, the other one in medical technology, and the other one a wheel bearing. They make bearings, yeah. One Japanese and 2 American, multi-billion-dollar companies who just do not even have a warehouse management system. So you want to talk about technology in your supply chain? These are billion-dollar companies. They have very high investor returns on Wall Street. Looking at the numbers just these past few days. And also talking about Azizi and around limiting market access, it's a slippery slope, yeah? We know, for example, in ASEAN, with non-tariff barriers, it's a very slippery slope. I think actually the onus is on the consumer, the customer, the one who buys from us. So forget about where you want to be, decide actually who you're serving, and let your customer decide. And the onus then is on all the people on this symposium. If you think that you want to buy a more sustainable product, there's no greenwashing, there's consistency, put your money where your mouth is and pay for it. That's the only way it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think Kunal Gupta had a good quote there where he said the label has become more important than the food, right? If that's what you really believe, look at the label and invest accordingly. Yeah, I agree with that.
And Dr. Rusti also mentioned something very important. He said, you know, he cited the cases why e-commerce applications were not so successful. He cited the cost of food being very sensitive. So there must be some equilibrium there, Azizi. In fact, how do you transition to a supply chain which is economical, it's compliant, it's in line with the standards and objectives, but how do we achieve that equilibrium? And what are the drivers to actually help us to move in that direction?
Azizi, you're on mute, Azizi.
You're on mute.
At the moment, most of the supply chain are not efficient. I think we got efficiency problem first. You know, there's a lot of losses, a lot of. I think we need to overcome that first. Once you overcome that, when you're so you are really putting your your battle on the even keel. You know? And the rest will be addition, will be will be your promotion, will be your branding. But if that fundamental is not resolved, there'll be leakages, there will be high rejects. I think it's not the right way to do. Because if you just look at the top alone, it won't be enough. You need to look at the underlying factors. So to me, I will strengthen the supply chain first. And I believe in that all the time. Even in agriculture, even when I was transporting latex globally. During the time there was no computer, we were using telex machine. It was so efficient because we really look at the supply chain. We strengthen the supply chain. I think that is the fundamental.
I agree, Marco. The point was, I don't know whether you heard one of the speakers was saying, I think it was on Stephanie's panel, was saying that the standards today are more of a recommendation than a mandatory compliance. I'm not sure that's correct. Maybe you correct me. clearly, if that's the case, then people are still going to take it as an invitation to comply, but not to apply. And if that's the case, isn't it then going to slow down the transformation of the industry to move faster through that migration process? What's your view on that?
There have been the existing halal standards, for example, they already made it mandatory to segregate halal in storage and transport. So that was already in existing standards, but it was not enforced by halal authorities. Right. However, what I see is that halal goes towards supply chain and value chain. Value chain, we talk about also sustainability, Islamic banking, finance, Islamic branding. So enforcement, I think, will follow the standards, and there might be some delay in there, but it is certainly coming. And I think there is a lot of pressure on big brand owners that are not, they don't want to lose the license to operate. Like Indonesia is the largest halal market in the world. I mean, if you're a big brand owner, you don't want to lose market access to Indonesia. So I think those big brand owners will need to be proactive, and I'm working with big brand owners to prepare them on halal supply chain and halal value chain. So I think big brand owners will make sure they protect the license to operate. Governments will put regulations in place, I'm sure. So you see that on halal, but also on sustainability. And
I thought it was one of the comments, I think it was Kunal Gupta that said that he perceived the halal label not as a halal segmentation, but as a health label that could promote. And this is makes a lot of sense from that point of view, because if it has certain compliances, protection, etc., it makes sense. Then why isn't there more buy-in from the wider industry to move in this direction? In which case, also governments may provide some subsidies or some incentives. As you say, Malaysia, Indonesia are big promoters of the Middle East. Is there an absence also from government investment to buy into this model? Azizi, what do you think from this?
I'm not too sure. In Malaysia, the government doesn't. I mean, they give incentive. They don't really specify what exactly, unless we ask and with the right reason. But I agree with Marco earlier. We have all the standard in place. Enforcement is a big issue in this country.
Right.
I mean, if you look at halal logistics, there is no enforcement at all. I've not heard of any enforcement done unless there's a crisis. But at the slaughterhouse, you may have upstream. Those are the easier, convenient. But when it comes to the logistics, it's a bit technical, I think. They may not have qualified people to enforce certain ruling. So that is the one aspect of it. Now, as far as the government is concerned, when I was the pioneer board member of HDC, all they want to see is that you build industry, create jobs, and so they don't go deeper than that. Even sometimes when we put our proposal for future expansion, sometimes they don't buy it. So that's always a problem. There are many things we wanted to do at HDC, but you were not allowed because there was no budget. Even though we know we're doing the right thing. So sometimes to depend on the government alone it can be a bit difficult.
Okay, Marco, can I ask you the same thing? I mean, have your clusters, have your halal parks energized change within the government community, or in some areas which are strongly sponsoring the change?
Definitely. So we work with our halal park in Indonesia, Modern Halal Valley. We work directly with local and national government. We do that hand in hand because governments, they are regulatory people. Whereas we are from the industry, so we need to educate also government on what are the industry requirements and how do we need help? What kind of help do we need from government? It's not only money, but it can also be to simplify regulation or to strengthen regulation or enforcement, like in logistics, to make it more attractive for companies to work via halal parks. So. Yeah.
Okay, it's good. No, because clearly there is also a few comments made earlier on about education, about really educating correctly, not speculatively, what it's all about. But can I come back to technology, Steph? Because clearly we know blockchain is probably the ideal way to track and trace the food chain, but it's complex. What is your alternative stepping stone moving forward to achieve a first level of technology embracement before we move to the more complex supply chain, which could be already be deployed by the big players, but not so much the small players? Where do you see that technology bridging coming in?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, the platformification is going to be key. So the enablement of platforms that are going to be able to link this. And we're already seeing, I mean, as Izzy mentioned, you know, the as a service model, having that software as a service and being able to provide that connectivity. But when we talk about platforms, it's not just talking about one solution. It's about connectivity between organizations. Ramon talks about billion-dollar companies that are able to operate without, you know, extensive technology, not using WMSs, etc. But where we're going to be able to have that connectivity and traceability between organizations and know where they're going to be bumps in the supply chain is going to happen from connectivity. So, you know, what we're seeing is that ultimately a lot of companies do start by getting, you know, ERP and financial systems in place. Then they're looking to things like transportation management systems as de facto supply chain orchestration tools. Then they'll be looking to integrate that with WMS, and they may come in different orders depending on the priorities of the organizations. But ultimately, when putting these roadmaps together, it's looking at connectivity between the applications and being able to provide the bridge between different companies in the supply chain. It's all well and good to clean house in your own company, but to be able to make that connectivity to your first and second tier suppliers and customers is going to ultimately drive the traceability and value that you want to derive from this.
Right. Perfect. Time is running. Sorry, go ahead, Azizi.
No, I'm just thinking that one of the things that we need to do is to digitize the supply chain where you have gaps, you know, where there are people-based. For example, in the agriculture sector, plantation, everything is people-based. Even now they're introducing a tablet, but then sometimes you don't have connectivity. You need to dock the tablet in the factory somewhere, you know, to download or upload the information. So I think that first part is to bridge the gap, you know, through digitalization where there is a gap. Once you have done that, it's a bit easier to do blockchain or any other thing. That part, you know, we need to do first.
Yeah. So time is running short, and I'll be asking each of you for your takeaway statement. But before that, I want to ask Ramon from a business point of view. So Ramon, you are now in the supplier, small supplier in the space, an SME supplier. What would you want as support from Marco or from Azizi or from anybody to help you not only survive in your sector, but build and grow your market share using the technology, but also elevating your share in the halal supply chain as a supplier?
No, I think actually what Azizi and Marco is doing exactly what they should be doing is by platforms like this at a symposium like this, sharing that knowledge and information that's available out there. I mean, if you look at the participation here, the numbers speak for themselves. Yeah, people are interested in hearing how they can do better. So it's our job to actually go out there and build that awareness. But I also go back to my original point. People need to pay to play. You need to put your money where your mouth is. And unfortunately, when you talk about sustainable products, when you talk about better manufactured products, better certification, this comes at a cost. So you as a consumer need to decide that you're willing to pay for it. Sure. And Azizi, and you actually asked the question, Joe, the role that governments need to play, yeah? Unfortunately, governments are so busy now with COVID-19, regardless of where you are anywhere in the world.
Yeah, sure.
But governments have a very important part to play in this.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And that can be said of governments as well. But they do have to, for the sake of their populace, raise the standard. And then if you want to go into a larger arena, look at it from an ASEAN perspective, look at it from a WTO perspective.
Yeah, so absolutely right. But you know, the reality is that the costs are rising, the complexity is rising, and there needs to be a lot more education and a lot more explanation of what's going on. Even technology, there's so much variation of what technologies that even people who are half savvy on technology can still be confused. Great discussion. Unfortunately, time is running, so I'm going to ask each of you to give me your takeaway message from this discussion. What do we need to do to move forward? So I'd like to start with Marco first, just to summarize, what are the takeaways, the message you want to leave our audience, our participants in terms of your message?
Thank you, Joe. So I found it a very interesting discussions we had. I think during this COVID times, I think the halal industry and I think the halal supply chain sector, I think there are a lot of opportunities. So I think I would like to end my takeaway as I think look at the opportunities I think the halal industry gives. Look also at sustainability. So include sustainability in halal, I think is an important one, because if you like it or not, there will be a lot of government regulations coming in every country on sustainability. So pick it up and be proactive on halal and sustainability, to be a first mover instead of a follower. So that would be my takeaway. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Steph, could I ask you for your takeaway?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, for me, it's remembering that information can often be more important than the inventory, right? So the information that goes along with the product is actually just as important as, or in a lot of cases, more important than the product itself. And the reason I say that is because, even not considering halal, organizations are looking to use buffer stocks and this sort of increased expenses in order to build in the resilience that they need in the supply chain to deal with the disruption that's happening at the moment. Issues with traceability, issues with disruptions, not being able to have that visibility in the supply chain. All of these are reasons to get a handle on your information in the supply chain. Add the halal dimension, and I think that there's a lot to be said about, reading the label and being aware of the information that's happening in your product and in the history of your product. So in general, I would say, read the label and look at the information that behind it, and then enable the information behind it and make sure that you're buying based on it, because that's what's going to drive change in the supply chain.
Interesting. Thanks, Stephanie. Azizi, your takeaway, please.
Well, when I did a little bit of research on the project or the paper that I presented, there's not much information on halal. Not much work been done, and a lot of it done in Malaysia, but it's purely from the university. There are no other reference that I could get. Therefore, there was no emphasis on the importance of halal in terms of getting data. So that is something I wish that the producing countries and the consuming countries, they can get together and exchange data, because most of the producing countries are non-Muslim, the bulk of it, and the consuming countries are Muslim. And I think there must be a way they need to talk to each other to get things right. To set the to set the standards, so that common standards, so that there'll be less trade friction and there'll be better clarity in terms of parliament integrity. That's my takeaway.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Ramon, you're last in the line, but not least.
3 points, Joe. One is listen and learn. Yeah? So platforms like LogiSYM and its partnership with MIFB are a great opportunity for us to listen and learn of what's out there. And I'm going to steal something that Marco said earlier in his keynote. Don't create unnecessary complexity, right? We do need to digitalize. We do need to have that visibility, that track and trace. But, do you need blockchain technology when maybe just a barcode will do? So first thing, listen and learn. Secondly, to the consumers out there, and all of us are consumers, you need to pay to play. It cannot very rarely be good and cheap, right? So if you want that quality, if you want to have a sustainable product or be a sustainable consumer, be willing to pay for it, unfortunately. And third and lastly is that the opportunity is out there. I said this in my opening remarks. COVID-19 has presented a lot of challenges to everyone, but at the same time, you can also see companies that are doing very, very well out there. Why? Because they've leveraged and tipped this on the side and taken COVID-19 as an opportunity to learn, to do something different, to reinvent the supply chains and come out ahead of the competition. So listen and learn, pay to play, and seize the opportunities when they come there.
Great. Stephanie, Azizi, Marco, Ramon, thank you so much for making this takeaway panel so exciting and summarizing a lot of the key points. A lot more to discuss, a lot more work to be done. I'd like to thank all the other speakers and panelists who joined us for this event today, including Dr. Rushdie, who I think woke up about, 3 o'clock in the morning, New York time, to join us, which really, really much appreciate that. I'm sorry he couldn't be with us also for the takeaway panel. I'd like to thank all the participants and delegates who joined us on this event. I hope that you found it useful. I hope you found it interesting. And I hope that the takeaways really sparks off some inspiration to get you moving forward, to learn more about the subject, take more interest in the sustainability factor, and really start engaging in the realities of our world. The completely changes in the new normal and everything else that's going on around us are part of this journey. So thank you all very much. Stay well, take care, and all the very best wishes to all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.